I walked into my home and found my wife laughing with my worst enemy, Dean. My heart stopped when I saw the betrayal in their eyes. For 15 years, I believed in love and trust, only to be shattered by their deceit. The woman I adored and the man I loathed were plotting behind my back. As they noticed me, silence fell, and the truth hit harder than any blow. This wasn't just infidelity. It was a calculated betrayal. I felt my world crumble, but a dark resolve began to form. Revenge would be my only solace. Stay tuned. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. I don't know who came up with that saying. I first heard it in the second Blade movie. Wesley Snipes took a break from fighting vampires to share some wisdom. The thing is, in real life, just like in the movie, it can be tough to tell who your real friends are and who your enemies might be. Right now I'm feeling really confused. Nothing is as straightforward as it seems. Over the last few years, my life has gotten very complicated. The guy I used to hate the most, who was pretty much my worst enemy, is now my best friend. But I feel like I'm living a lie, and I'm not sure I'm being a good friend to him. My lovely wife and I are at the local hospital trying to keep him calm as we wait for his baby to be born. But again, everything is not as it seems. As we sit and wait for the doctor to tell us everything is okay, I think about telling the truth. I've always tried to be honest, and keeping this secret is driving me crazy. But if I let it out, it could ruin 2 marriages. Maybe hiding the truth is better for everyone involved. After all, we're all fairly happy. Who am I to mess with fate? My name is Gerald, but my friends call me Jerry. It sounds normal, doesn't it? The problem is my parents had a weird sense of humor. Our last name is Lewis. See the problem? Yep, when my teachers called out my name in school, the whole class laughed when they heard Jerry Lewis. But having that name worked out well for me. It helped me make friends easily. Pretty soon everyone knew me. I became popular without even trying. Some guys who had to work harder for attention didn't like that. In a small town where everyone knows each other, those things can hurt. By the time high school ended and we went off to college, everyone had their roles in our social circles firmly set. Sometimes, someone would discover a new skill or get something nice that made them more popular. But it was also common for someone to find out something embarrassing that knocked them down a peg. Some things never changed, though, good or bad. They were stuck in our lives forever. On the bad side, there was a kid named Jim Neighbors who peed his pants in 1st grade. Some people still laugh about that today. Jim left town right after high school and went to college somewhere far away. He never came back, not even for a visit. On the good side, Lacey Kincaid was the prettiest girl in town. She was the same in kindergarten as she was now. Lacey is amazing. She's beautiful and incredibly sweet. The only issue for me was that she was dating my rival. Yes, I said rival. I'm not a superhero or villain, but I do have a rival. We were never just friendly competitors. We were more like true enemies. I didn't realize it until we got to college. To have a fair competition, both sides need to know they are competing. That was not the case with us. I found out after graduation that my rival, Dean Martin, cheated to win everything we went after. In our last year in college, we were both up for homecoming king. I learned 6 months later that I actually won, but Dean had messed with the votes. He needed to be king. Everyone knew Lacey would be queen, and he didn't want her dancing with another guy. But like always, I let it slide. I'm a survivor. I don't stress over little things. I've learned to choose my battles and make the best of any situation. I believe in balance, even if it takes time for things to even out again. In fact, 4 years ago, at 22 years old, holding my new engineering degree, I thought things had finally tipped in my favor. This belief came when an amazing thing happened a few weeks after graduation. Miranda Swainpool moved into town. Her moving in changed everything in our social scene. All of a sudden, many long-term relationships ended or hit pause. Miranda, while different from Lacey, was just as beautiful. They were complete opposites. Lacey had long, flowing blonde hair down to her back. Miranda's hair was shiny and dark, cut short to her chin. Lacey was about 5 feet tall with a petite shape. Miranda was taller at around 5'4", but had a curvier body. She was still slender but had a fuller chest and a nice, round figure. Lacey was the sweet, pretty girl you'd expect to be prom queen. Miranda had a confidence that was hard to miss. Lacey looked fantastic in a gown. Miranda looked great in jeans and swimsuits, unlike anyone else we knew. The person who was most upset when Miranda moved to our town was Dean. The day before graduation, he was feeling really good about himself. He had just gotten Lacey to agree to marry him, and their engagement was the big news everywhere. I had a little crush on Lacey. I always hoped she would see that Dean was not a good person and maybe give me a chance. But now that she was engaged, I was just trying to stay positive, thinking I would make some lemonade out of this sour situation. Unfortunately, I thought it would taste pretty bitter. But I was wrong. Life worked in my favor. When Miranda came to town right after Dean's big announcement, he lost his chance. He stood there speechless as other guys tried hard to win her over. People in town couldn't stop talking about Miranda. When Phil made a comment about how great Miranda looked, Dean just looked at Lacey, wishing things were different. When Bob joked about how amazing Miranda was, Dean looked over at Lacey and frowned. For once, the situation gave me a chance. So what did I do? Nothing at all. While other guys made fools of themselves trying to impress her, I played it cool and waited. Miranda met new people, went out with a few guys, and I thought this could help her see how I compared. My mom was friends with Miranda's aunt. This meant I helped Miranda move into her new room at her aunt's house. I spent 3 days moving heavy furniture and even helped paint her room. After all that work, Miranda's aunt suggested we do something fun to relax. I asked Miranda if she wanted to go see a movie and maybe get some ice cream after. She happily said yes, and I felt like I had a head start. Miranda was 2 years older than me, but that didn't matter at all. Over the next 4 years, we both found jobs, dated, got married, and bought a house together. Those first 4 years after college were full of change for all of us. We grew up and moved on from the old ways. What mattered back in school seemed silly now. That was clear with Dean. He graduated with a basic degree and became a salesman. I, on the other hand, spent 4 years as a manufacturing engineer in a local car factory. We had different paths, and it was starting to show. One funny thing about our town was that many of us had known each other since we were kids. We still hung out in the same places because in a small town, there aren't many options. So if the older crowd was at one bar, the younger crowd went to another place. This brings us to our story. There's a bar on the east side called the Boar's Nest. It's run by a guy who likes the show The Dukes of Hazzard. He wanted us to call him Boss Hogg, but we just call him Porky. It's the same idea, just a different name. The Boar's Nest is many things to different people. It's a neighborhood bar, a sports bar, and sometimes even has music or dancing depending on when you visit. I had played there a lot with my band over the years, and I even kept my guitar in Porky's office. It was a regular hangout for many of us, so it wasn't strange for Miranda and me to head there after dinner on a lazy Thursday for drinks and to chat. It also wasn't odd for Lacey and Dean to be there too. Rumors around town said all was not well for Dean and Lacey, but they put on a good show in public. I couldn't say that Dean and I were friends, but we had gotten along better over time. Lacey, however, was still someone I thought highly of. Sadly, Miranda and Lacey didn't get along, which made things tough. So when I waved at Lacey as we walked in, I got an elbow from Miranda. "Why are you waving at her?" Miranda whispered angrily. "I've known her forever. She's nice, even if her husband is a jerk." I replied, "It's just polite. If you don't like her, then don't wave back. But she's always been nice to you." "Sweetie, I'm sorry," she said. "But she wants you. I can tell." I laughed. "She wants me so much. She married the guy I dislike most." We sat down with our friends and moved past our little fight. After a few beers, things felt normal again. I talked about cars with the guys, and Miranda rolled her eyes. There were a couple of guys who loved cars just like I did, eager to hear me talk about the changes I made to my Mustang. I saw Lacey and Dean sitting at a small table, arguing as usual. Dean got up and walked toward me. He was always bigger than I was. I was a slim track runner, and Dean had a tougher football player look. I still ran a lot, but most of Dean's exercise since finishing school seemed to come from eating big meals. "When was the last time you were with my wife?" he asked me, sounding drunk. "I should beat you up." "About 3 minutes ago," I replied calmly. "We were together while you were yelling at her. That's why she doesn't listen to you." "Go home, Dean, you're drunk," said Miranda, standing next to me. "He's never been with your wife. I'd keep him on a tight leash." "You better," he told her. "I should beat you up," he said to me again. I just shook my head and walked over to play darts with some friends. About an hour later, a less drunk Dean came back, acting like nothing had happened. We were about to start a game when Porky came over, looking like he needed something. "Jerry Lewis," he said. "I need a favor, and it's serious." "Ha ha," I laughed. "Seriously, Jerry," he said. "The band I hired for tonight is late, and the crowd is getting restless. I talked to your friends. Luckily, they're all here. Could you all play a few songs until my band arrives?" "We haven't practiced," I said. "You guys are great," he said. "You've been playing together since high school. You don't need to practice. Come on, Jerry, if you help me, all your drinks and food are free. Even for your wife." "All right, then," I said. Lacey was angrier than I'd ever been. Everyone in town seemed to know Dean and I had problems in our marriage, but they didn't know the details. I was 26, we had been married for 4 years, and I wanted out. For months, I had tried to get Dean to divorce me. Our issues started building lately, but they really began during our first year of marriage. Honestly, they started in college, even before we graduated or got married. We should have never married. We were just too different. I blamed our small town and its thinking for this mess. There were so many traditions and expectations that weighed on me. I felt trapped by what everyone said I should do. People want to believe in happy endings. They want to see the popular girl and the star player end up together, but no one asks what happens after the wedding. I don't know what happens in every story, but I'll tell you this. In mine, the prince quickly turned back into a frog after the wedding. It was my own mistake. Many people gave me advice, including my parents, who wanted the best for me. But they helped me make a choice that I knew in my heart was wrong. I've always been a simple girl with simple dreams. I don't need a big house or tons of money. I just want a nice home, a man who loves me, and a family. When I started school, I realized I was pretty, which surprised me. I looked just like my sisters and thought of myself as plain. Suddenly, many boys were kind to me, making fools of themselves to get my attention. I did my best to be nice to everyone, just like my parents and sisters told me to do. It seemed to make people like me more. However, when I started to like the boys too, it rarely worked out. I liked the nicer boys, but they never asked me out. It was always the more bold ones who did. By my second year of high school, my life was more or less decided. I was a cheerleader, and it was expected that I would date someone popular. Dean and I ended up together, though it was more his doing than a natural connection. After a couple of years, going along with things felt easier. Every time I suggested dating other people just to see, he got upset. By college, Dean felt like part of my family. He seemed to succeed at everything, and my parents believed he would be successful in his future. But it was all a lie. A few days after graduation, I found out Dean wasn't the homecoming king. He had cheated. He not only rigged the contest, but also cheated on me to do it. There was a girl in our class known for being loose. Every town has one, and ours had Leslie Wisdom. She was the smartest girl in class, but not very nice. She was big, and while she had many dates, she never had a real boyfriend. Rumor had it that she had been with most of the boys in our class at some point. Leslie always signed up for any group or project she could. She was really smart, and her skills in organizing things were very helpful. One day, Leslie was responsible for counting the votes for the homecoming court and deciding who would win. Leslie knew before anyone else that, based on the early votes, Dean was likely to lose. There was some pushback against him. Dean was nice to me, but he was often rude to others. A few weeks after my wedding, I had a surprising talk with Leslie. She revealed that she had changed enough votes to help Dean win in a very close race against Jerry. In return, she had been with Dean. Talking to Leslie felt like finding out that Santa Claus wasn't real. It changed everything for me. I had just returned from my honeymoon. I was still trying to understand that Dean thought our time together was not great. After waiting 6 years for that moment, it was clear he didn't get what he expected. But what did he think would happen? I was inexperienced. I felt bad that he was disappointed. I was angry that he had lied to me about his experience. Dean had been with a lot of girls in our class. Leslie told me he had been with her to become homecoming king. But before that, he had treated her poorly. He thought he was too good for girls like her. In our class, Leslie had been with almost every guy, except a couple, and Jerry was on her mind. But she didn't believe it would ever happen. The most shocking thing Leslie told me was that my whole life was a lie. I was living in a bubble. In high school and college, things had come easily to me. I got good grades and won contests not because I worked hard, but because I was pretty. People wanted to be around me because of that. Dean had it easy too, but he knew it. He understood that as long as he was the prince to my princess, he would get special treatment. He could get away with things because everyone wanted to see him succeed. I was shocked. Leslie explained that if I thought my life was tough, I should think about Jerry. He always came second to Dean, and it was unfair. Jerry was the nicest guy. He was kind, funny, and smart. He worked hard and deserved to win, but he never got the chance. My boyfriend had pushed him aside to take the win. Jerry always accepted his losses with grace and never complained. In our small town, people didn't want to see a scene. Dean would have made a fuss if he lost, which is why he often got the win. Leslie had more to share. She told me a secret only Jerry's close friends knew. Jerry had liked me for years. He never said anything because I was with Dean, and he respected that. Leslie's talk was her way of saying that life outside of school would be different. The bubble I lived in had burst. I wasn't as smart as I thought. My boyfriend was dishonest. Being pretty and nice didn't matter anymore. A few days later, things got worse. Miranda came to town, and suddenly I wasn't the only attractive girl anymore. It took some time, but it was clear that I might still be the prettiest, but Miranda was the sexiest and most exciting. Dean was not happy about it. We had just gotten married, and people were still congratulating him for marrying me. But then Miranda's arrival shifted everything. Dean liked to have the best of everything. Between Miranda and me, he felt like he had lost out. I could see him comparing us, looking at my figure and then at Miranda's and frowning. In a few weeks, Miranda ended up with Jerry, which made Dean even angrier. Over the past 4 years, things had only gotten worse for us. It felt terrible to know that my husband saw me as less than perfect. It was hard knowing he thought he deserved better. Jerry worked hard, but Dean never acknowledged that. He complained that Jerry got a better job just because of luck, not hard work. I tried to explain that Jerry became an engineer because he had earned his degree in college. Dean thought he would become a football player, so he only took general education classes. In the end, he found himself in sales. This didn't really bother me, but for Dean, being second or third best was hard to take. His friend Jerry had a better job and made more money, which really affected Dean. But life wasn't easy for anyone. Watching Jerry with Miranda was tough for me, too. Over the years, I noticed Jerry was like me. He was happy with what he had. Instead of complaining about what he didn't have, he focused on making his life better. He treated Miranda with care. It was clear she meant a lot to him. As time went by, Miranda got used to this care. She also became aware of how others looked at her. She started to feel special and thought she deserved that attention. "Are you even listening to me?" Dean shouted. "I told you it didn't mean anything. I don't love her. I did it for you." His yelling brought me back to the fight we were having. When we walked into the bar that night, I saw him giving flirty looks to one of the new waitresses even before we sat with our friends. It was the same story again. She had large breasts and other features too, but those were the main focus. Jerry tried to convince me to get breast implants before. I always said no. I told him that if he wanted someone else, he could go find them. We didn't have the money for that anyway. I was angry when I saw them looking at each other. "So, how many times have you been with her?" I asked. It had happened so many times that I couldn't even cry about it anymore. At first, he denied it, and the waitress quickly slipped away when she sensed trouble. We kept arguing and drinking after that. I was only having soda, but Jerry was getting tipsy. He wasn't drunk yet, but he was getting close when Jerry and Miranda came in. That night was hot, and Miranda dressed for the weather like I did, in shorts and a sleeveless top. Many women in the bar wore the same, but few looked like Miranda. When Jerry saw her, he gasped. His eyes lit up. He forgot about our fight. "I hate that lucky guy," he muttered under his breath. "Why?" I asked. "Is he lucky because he worked hard? Or is it just because you married me before she got here? Tell me, Dean, if Miranda had come here first, would you have left me for her?" "Of course not," he lied. It hurt that even while denying it, his eyes were glued to her body. "Why are you defending him?" he shouted. He looked me over as if he could spot a lie just by staring. But we'd done this too many times. He wanted to turn the focus away from our fight. "You're with him, aren't you?" he yelled, suddenly standing and knocking over his chair. He marched over to Jerry and yelled, "When was the last time you were with my wife?" Even while yelling, he kept looking at Miranda. Jerry's reaction was surprising. He wasn't scared of Dean. They had fought enough as kids for Jerry to know he could stand up to him. After school, Jerry had stayed in good shape, unlike Dean. Both Jerry and Miranda denied Dean's accusation. From across the room, Miranda gave me a dirty look. I didn't understand why she didn't like me. I had tried to be friends since she moved to town, but she seemed to dislike me for no reason. Dean came back to me, but first stopped for a moment to talk to that waitress. She laughed at me, so I knew he said something mean. I almost left, but then he sat back down. "We just got here. Where are you going?" he complained. "I was going to leave so you could be with Miss Titties," I replied. "What are you talking about?" he asked. "I was just flirting with her. Come on. Everyone knows I'm married to you. I was just having a little fun. What's the big deal?" As he sank heavily into his seat, the waitress brought him another beer. She leaned in so much that her top almost fell. She looked at me like she wanted to start trouble. Before I could say anything, the mood in the bar changed. Porky had Jerry's band play some songs. I noticed the smirking waitress while the band started my favorite song. "So I'm no fun, huh?" I spat at Dean. "Maybe I need someone better to bring out the fun in me." Before he could reply, I headed for the stage in a fury. Porky had two big bouncers keeping people away, but I managed to slip past them. Just as Erin began singing the first verse, I jumped on stage and danced my heart out. She loves to dance. She loves to sing. "She can do it all," sang Erin. I spun 3 times and did a cartwheel in the air. The crowd went wild. I was just as surprised as they were. Honestly, I was shocked I didn't fall. I guess it was like riding a bike. I had been a cheerleader for most of my life. I still exercised a lot, but at 26 years old, I felt ancient. I danced on the stage mostly by myself, like I was just having fun at home in our apartment. The song was "Any Way You Want It" by Journey. I had been dancing to it since I was a kid. The crowd in the bar had heard the band play it so many times, and they did a great job, but somehow seeing me dance made it even better. Everyone in the bar was enjoying the music and watching me. They were curious about what I would do next. When Jerry started his guitar solo, I did what every kid has done at least once. I jumped next to him, pretending to play my imaginary guitar, shaking my hips to the beat. The crowd loved it. They enjoyed everything I did. My dance moves varied from simple cheerleader jumps to more playful shakes. When the song ended, everyone in the bar stood up and clapped. But not everyone was happy. 3 people looked angry. One was Dean, another was Miranda, and the last was the manager of the band that was supposed to perform that night. As I stepped off the stage with Erin, I heard someone telling the manager off. "Either get on stage or leave," Porky yelled. The other band was late, so if they didn't like being outshined, they should be on time. Erin and Jeff, the drummer, came over to hug me. They told me I could dance with them any time. I walked over to Jerry, who was putting his guitar in a case. That's when everything went wrong. "Get your hands off my wife!" Dean shouted. His face was red and his eyes looked wild. He looked like he was about to explode. I should say that Dean didn't have any fighting skills. He was just really mad. Everyone started laughing at him. One of the bouncers pointed out that Jerry wasn't even touching me. He was bent over his guitar case, focused on it. I had my arms around Jerry because I was so excited from dancing. It felt amazing. I was happier than I'd been in a long time, and I just wanted to share that joy. "Yeah, Dean," I said. "You said it yourself. I was just having a little fun." "Because the only one who gets to have any fun with him is me, you stupid jerk," screamed Miranda. She tried to push through the crowd to get to me. A couple of big bouncers stopped her, holding her back. One even stopped Dean from getting near me and Jerry. "I'll show you fun," Miranda yelled. "Just wait until I get loose." "I think you've had enough fun already," one of the bouncers said. "You both need to take it outside." I almost laughed as Dean and Miranda were dragged out of the bar, shouting and kicking. Lots of people came over to talk to me, but I wanted to speak to one person. I walked over to where Jerry, Erin, and the other guys in the band were chatting with Porky. "Jerry, I'm really sorry about Dean making a mess of things tonight," I told him. He turned and gave me a small smile. When our eyes met, something felt different. I remembered what Leslie had told me years ago. I knew then that she wasn't just talking nonsense. Jerry struggled to even look at me. I had known him most of my life, but this was the first time we truly talked. Sure, we had cheered for the same teams or passed around food at picnics, but we had never really connected. It hit me hard. I felt cheated. There had been this amazing person right in front of me all along, and I never got to know him because Dean had always been there. Every time I mentioned going out with anyone else, Dean would freak out. I later found out he had been unfaithful, expecting me to stay loyal to him. Before now, I had never thought anyone else might be better for me than Dean. Dean never let me think about that. Miranda's just as much to blame as Dean is, Jerry said calmly. At least Dean was drunk. Miranda was just... well, that's just how she is. He shrugged, as if he didn't understand her behavior either. Speaking of my lovely wife, he said, I better find her before she gets really angry at me. As he turned to leave, I remembered I needed to do the same. Dean, I couldn't believe they kicked me out of the bar. They clearly didn't know who I was. Maybe they did. There were plenty of jealous people around. The bouncers were big guys, probably my age. They were likely losers I had embarrassed on the football field, but I could only deal with one loser at a time. Right now, I needed to focus on the guy who had always been a thorn in my side. Jerry was always getting in my way. But there were some things that poor little Jerry didn't know. There were many secrets and stories being told. I had to be careful, though. Jerry was always trying to keep up with me, but I was always a little ahead. But tonight made me realize that I couldn't let my guard down for even a moment with him around. Tonight had been a real mess. First, Lacey started on me as soon as I got home. Someone, probably one of those nosy girls in our building, had told her that I was cheating on her. We had been arguing about it all night. Finally, we decided to go to the bar. That waitress I had been talking to couldn't leave us alone. She acted like she was my girlfriend. Then, to make things worse, Jerry and his attractive wife arrived. The first thing he did when he walked in was wave at my wife. Okay, she waved at him first. But that didn't mean he had to wave back. Lacey waved at everyone. But there was something about the way they waved at each other. I decided to use it to distract Lacey from worrying about me. I pretended to be drunker than I was. I walked over to Jerry and accused him of being with Lacey. That was funny. The only person in town less likely to cheat than Lacey was Jerry. But it was nice to get a break from Lacey for a bit. It gave me a closer look at Miranda. Even 4 years after moving to town, she looked even better. Her figure turned heads. She had curves that were just right. I couldn't help but imagine what it would be like to be with her. She looked at me like I was nothing. For the past 4 years, she had been devoted to Jerry. Wherever Jerry went, she went too. She even showed up at his work 2 or 3 times a week to have lunch. I wasn't sure if it was love, worry, or something else. Jerry had somehow found a good job in the engineering section at the nearby auto plant. From what I heard, he was doing well and getting promoted a lot. That job should have been mine. I hadn't gone into engineering because I was not good at math, but they have tools for that now. I should have been an engineer. Miranda, like me, had a quick temper. She was also very focused. The difference was that she cared only about one person, Jerry. I was sure she knew how fast his heart was beating, and Jerry was all about her. She had the finest things. Her car was nicer than mine, and their house was bigger. They were always on trips, and he bought her gifts all the time. It made me sick. When his band practiced, she was there. She sat on his speaker, doing something on her phone while her long legs dangled down. Like most of my rivals, I knew a lot about Jerry. He loved Miranda, and everyone knew that. But not many people knew that his love for her was like the parts he made at the factory. It wasn't real. Jerry had gotten so used to losing to me that he learned to settle. Unlike me, Jerry could be happy with something that was just okay. To him, he had settled for Miranda. There wasn't anything wrong with Miranda. She was the prettiest girl in town. But in Jerry's eyes, no one could ever match the woman I was with. Lots of guys liked Lacey. They didn't know that she wasn't as great as they thought. Yes, Lacey had a cute smile and bright blue eyes. She was as sweet as could be, and that's how I got trapped. I'm a creature of habit. By the time we got to high school, I figured I was meant for great things. I only wanted the best, so it made sense to have the prettiest girl in town by my side. So, long before any of the other guys in high school were serious about dating, I had Lacey. I was bigger and more outgoing than most of the other boys. I was popular and on the football team. Any guy who thought about dating Lacey either got hurt or decided not to try. But we had problems almost from the start. We looked good together, but our personalities just didn't match. We made it through high school together and started planning for our future. I wanted to play pro football and get into the entertainment world. I thought maybe I could be a sportscaster or act in movies. I would have been great in action films. I could point a gun and say, "I'll be back, better than anyone." Lacey wanted a nice house on some land. She couldn't decide if she wanted a big garden or a couple of horses. The whole idea disgusted me. I saw us living in a big city. Lacey wanted kids. Every year she pushed more for us to start a family. I had seen kids. They didn't impress me. I didn't want those noisy, messy little beings ruining my life anytime soon. Many of our friends had started families, and their lives were a struggle. Everything I did with Lacey was to keep up our image. The kids and even the teachers loved it. I started getting grades that I knew I didn't really deserve. I thought it was like a fairy tale. Often I would add up my scores and think I'd get a shaky C, just enough to stay on the team. But when my report card arrived, I was always surprised to see that many of those shaky C's were actually B's or better. After a while, I just expected it. Because of that, I didn't put much effort into my schoolwork. It was funny to watch Jerry work so hard. He studied both before and after track practice. He always had a book with him, even at lunchtime. But things changed just before graduation. Everyone in town was talking about how school was ending, and we would soon start working. A couple of guys in the locker room even whispered about possibly dating Lacey now that we were adults. They thought the college stuff like going steady didn't matter anymore. I wasn't married to her. Then I made the biggest mistake of my life. Just before our graduation ceremony, I dropped to one knee in front of everyone. I asked Lacey to marry me, and everyone was waiting breathlessly for her answer. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Lacey and I had been having some issues. She had mentioned wanting to date other people because of the rumors about me being with other girls during college. As I looked at Lacey, I could see that she might say no. My heart sank. I added more to my proposal, trying to sound more sincere. "Lace, I'm not perfect," I said. The crowd gasped. "I've made mistakes," I continued, "but I have always loved you. If you let me, I will spend my life making you happy. Please?" Even Lacey knew that if she said no after that, people would be upset. "Okay," she said softly with a nod. The whole room erupted with cheers. Even the guys who had been talking about her were clapping. It was such a foolish thing to do. I felt like I was ruining my life. For the next month, I was stuck planning the wedding. Between my mom, her mom, and Lacey, I was surrounded by women all the time. People in town gave us lots of gifts and cash. Our honeymoon was something we couldn't have paid for ourselves. I kept thinking that after the wedding, it would all be worth it. I would finally be with Lacey in a way that no one else ever had. But no one could have prepared me for what happened in our hotel room. Lacey had no idea what to do. She was innocent, and it showed. I tried to touch her legs, thinking it would spark something, but it didn't. She sat there asking me what she should do. I could tell she wanted to, but she wasn't excited at all. I told her to take her clothes off. She did right away, carefully folding each piece and placing them in a special bin. Then she sat on the bed, completely naked, looking so innocent. She didn't cover anything, but surprisingly, she wasn't showing any excitement. I took off my clothes, too. I was very eager thinking about being with her. But Lacey just sat there, smiling. It was awkward. Women are usually more excited or surprised. I was expecting her to react differently, especially since she had no experience. I figured the easiest way to keep the guys quiet was to give them a story. I started telling them a wild tale about how I had made some bold moves with Lacey. At first, they were really into it, but soon enough I noticed fewer people around. "Hey, where are you all going?" I asked. "Don't you want to hear about Lacey?" "Maybe later," one guy said. "Miranda is here." "Who's Miranda?" I asked, but he was already rushing outside. I followed them out and saw all the women gathered and looking in one direction. As I turned to look, I couldn't believe my eyes. This woman looked better than Lacey in every way. She had an amazing figure. While Lacey had a nice shape, this woman had a stunning body. When she walked, it was hard to look away. I got really annoyed. I felt my jaw drop. Worse was when Rick, the guy who had brought her to the party, introduced her to me. Why was this worse? He acted like I was no threat at all. He even told her she didn't have to worry about me. He called me safe. What did he think I was? Some weakling? It felt like a joke. I was far from harmless. Leaving that girl around me would lead to trouble. But he did. She looked at me like I was nothing. "Just got married, huh?" she asked. I felt more anger rising. People often said Lacey's voice was soothing, but this woman spoke like someone who knew how to get attention. Just hearing her made me want to connect, and she knew it. "So how's married life?" she asked, and I didn't even know how to answer. "I moved here to start fresh and get married," she shared. I could feel my confidence fading. I needed to recover. "So how did you and Rick meet?" I asked, curious how he snagged such a beautiful woman. "Who?" she replied, puzzled. "Rick, the guy you came with," I repeated. "Oh, him?" she said with a smirk. "Everyone said this party would be popular. I came hoping to see someone I like." "Who are you interested in?" I probed. "You probably wouldn't know him," she said. "I doubt he's someone you hang out with." "I know everyone here," I shot back. "I'm kind of a big deal." "Yeah, but if you just suck up to people, anyone can be popular," she sneered. "From what I've heard, you seem not so nice. I can't see you being friends with Jerry." My temper flared. "Jerry?" I exclaimed, almost spilling my drink. "You're talking about Jerry Lewis?" "That's the one," she said with a smug look. I still remember how confident she seemed back then. It was clear she had him wrapped around her finger, but it looked like she was just as caught up in his charm. I watched her get frustrated, kicking a door and moving in a way that made it hard not to stare. Feeling my gaze on her, she shot back, "Keep your eyes where they belong." "Leave me alone," I retorted. "I'm sure you wish you could," she smirked back at me. "I'm sure you're thinking about being close to me right now," she said, and then she laughed at me. "Too bad you can't," she said playfully. "All of this," she pointed at herself, "is for my Jerry." She turned around and the light from the bar showed a tattoo just above her backside. Maybe it was because she kicked the door, but her shorts had slid low enough for me to see it. It was a heart, surrounded by vines and roses. What made me the angriest was seeing Jerry's name in that tattoo. "Keep your friend away from Jerry," she said. "Same goes for you," I shot back. "That's not true," she replied. She waved at him first. She climbed up on that stage when she shouldn't have been there. She was the one all over him, not the other way around. "You looked really silly yelling at Jerry when he was just playing his guitar, and your friend was hanging all over him like a cheap outfit. You'd better watch her before I end up hurting her." We both jumped when the side door to the bar opened. Jerry walked out, and she rushed to him like she was on fire, but she stopped when she saw Lacey coming out of the same door almost at the same time. "You just can't stay away from her, can you?" she shouted. "Huh?" Jerry replied, looking confused. That look on his face told me everything. My old friend Jerry was clueless. He had no idea what was happening around him. I could see that his angry wife wasn't thinking straight. Jerry's reaction should have shown her that he was not interested in Lacey at all. He was not the type to cheat. The last thing I focused on was Lacey. My wife was the most confused and emotional of the three, but I knew her best, so she was easiest for me to understand. She was done with my nonsense and wanted to give me a taste of my own medicine. She had finally realized that Jerry liked her. If Miranda hadn't been there to guard her, I think Lacey would have tried to get closer to Jerry. That waitress from tonight was possibly the last straw. And honestly, I was getting close to letting Lacey go. I wanted to figure out how to make that work for me. The ride home was quiet. Miranda sat next to me, so silent that I knew I was in trouble when we got home. I tried to zone out, listening to my Mustang's powerful engine roar. I could not figure out what was happening. All I knew was that women are confusing. It started with Lacey waving at me. She had done that many times, but this wave felt different somehow. Or maybe I was reading too much into it. But it did seem to make Miranda mad. Then there was Dean, accusing me of being with Lacey. Maybe that wave had something to do with it, since Dean also reacted strongly. But when Dean drank, he could get upset about anything. I wondered if Lacey was cheating on Dean. If that were true, or even if he thought it was true, it could drive anyone crazy. And with Lacey, who was different from other women, who knows what Dean might do? If I married Lacey, I would want to protect her from anyone trying to come between us. And I felt the same about Miranda. Then there was Lacey herself. What made her jump on that stage with us? One thing was clear, she could still dance really well, but her getting close to me made Dean furious. Sadly, Miranda didn't like it either, and I couldn't blame her. A moment after I got onto the freeway, I saw a Michigan State police car behind me with its lights flashing. I was so lost in thought that I didn't even realize how fast I was going. License, registration, and proof? He started to say, but then he noticed Miranda and got distracted. Here you go, officer, I said, handing him my license and documents. Sir, do you know why I pulled you over? He asked. I'm hoping it wasn't just to check out my wife, I replied. Do you know how fast you were going, sir? He asked nervously. About 80, I answered. Sir, my radar measured you at over 90 and speeding, he said. If I hadn't pulled you over, you would have been in serious trouble. He went back to his car to check my information. He returned nearly 10 minutes later with a ticket that looked huge. He folded it and pointed out the court details. I gave you a break, he said. I only wrote you up for 80. Thanks, officer. How much is the ticket? I asked. Oh, we don't know the amount, he replied. It depends on where you were when we stopped you. Like I said, you were lucky I caught you. I guess we're both lucky I follow the law, I said. He looked puzzled. If I didn't, you'd be in trouble, being a state cop and all. This city is where I grew up. I know every street, and my Mustang is much quicker than your old Charger. Drive carefully, sir, the officer said. I've never had a ticket, Miranda replied after the cop turned to leave. Miranda, you're so pretty that no cop would give you a ticket, I said. Stop teasing me, she said, sounding angry. Everywhere we go, all the guys just look at you, I told her. That's not just my looks. That's my body, she said. I chuckled as I turned onto our street. You really don't get it, do you? She smiled back. Maybe that's why I fell in love with you. You embarrassed me today, I said as we entered our house. She just laughed. You think that's funny? I asked her. Okay, it was kind of funny, she said, laughing more. Jerry Lewis asking if something is funny. Seeing that I was serious, she came over and hugged me. Do you love me, Jerry? She asked. Of course, I replied. I always have and always will. I believe you, she said. Am I pretty? Definitely, I answered. Am I as pretty as Lacey? She asked. Prettier, I said. Your face, that olive skin, and those bright eyes make you stunning. I also love your full lips. Sometimes I just want to kiss them, and I love watching you while you sleep. You see, silly? That's what I mean. I can't lose you. I just can't, she cried, almost in tears. Randa, what's happening with us? I asked. Since I moved here, it's always the same thing, she started. Everyone talks about how beautiful Lacey is. They think she's the prettiest girl around. I hear that I'm almost as pretty. But that doesn't help. They say I'm sexier, which just means I'm easier to get with. But I'm not, Jerry. I love you more than anyone, but even you follow Lacey around like a puppy. I know before I got here, you, like every guy in town, adored her. And I heard her marriage to that guy isn't great. I know you two have competed since school. Many say you're both equal. Now it feels like Lacey picked to be with you instead of her husband. Let's be honest. Dean was at his best in college, and since then he's gotten worse. He's gained weight, while you've become better. You have a good job and great chances ahead. I've said how much I love you. Lacey can't have you, Jerry. She needs to back off. You're mine, and I won't let her take you. Did you notice how she jumped on that stage and got close to a married man? You think I embarrassed you, but I should have pulled her off that stage right there. I started laughing then. Miranda isn't much of a fighter. Lacey, though smaller, is stronger, but the look in her eyes showed me she was serious. Okay, Randa, I said, holding her hand. I'll admit maybe I liked Lacey before you came. We all did. But I married you because I love you. I wanted to share my life with you. When I was a kid, I dreamed of being a race car driver. Now I see things differently. I know now I wouldn't have been great at it, but I shine as an engineer. Lacey was a childhood crush. She was a dream. But you are my real life, honey. I'm exactly where I want to be. Something changed in her eyes then, as if something clicked. Well, I'm not, she said. Where do you want to be? I asked. Randa, I'll do anything. Just tell me. She stopped me with her finger on my lips and took my hand, leading me to our sofa. She placed my hand on her chest. I understood what she wanted and gently squeezed, making her let out a soft moan. Moments later, we were close and exploring each other. As I kissed one of her soft spots, she pushed me back. "I'm not sure you can handle these," she teased. "Your dream girl has small A cups. Mine are double Ds. Maybe they're too much for you." As she said that, she took hold of me and moved down slowly. "This fits just right," she sighed. "Nobody fits me better, baby." I knew Miranda wasn't a virgin when we got together. She was older than Dean, Lacey, and me, and she grew up in a bigger place. But after all the Lacey and Dean drama that night, I couldn't resist teasing her. "Not even Dean," I joked. "Definitely not Dean," she said quickly. But suddenly I felt a knot in my stomach. "What's wrong?" she asked, worried. "No wonder you're scared about me and Lacey," I said. "Are you the one who cheated? When did you get with Dean?" I never have," she stammered, but she didn't sound convincing. Suddenly I felt like I couldn't breathe. I just needed to get away from her and leave the house. I quickly put my pants on and pulled my shirt over my head before she noticed I was going. I grabbed my keys from the kitchen counter and stepped outside. It was funny. My red Mustang GT looked black in the dark, but when I started the engine, it roared loudly like a fierce guardian. Moments later, I was speeding down our street toward the freeway. My iPhone beeped from the passenger seat where I had tossed it. I looked and saw it was Miranda calling. I reached over and turned it off. Lacey didn't say anything. I just walked over to the car and held out my hand for the keys. He gave them to me, and we didn't need to talk. We had done this before. "Lace, what the heck?" he shouted. "You were acting really out of line. You got up on stage, danced like a stripper, and rubbed against Jerry. Seriously, of all people, why him? Isn't it enough that he got a better job and drives a better car? Everyone in this town acts like he's some kind of saint, and his wife is perfect. Why did it have to be him?" His complaining broke my silence. "You started it!" I yelled back. "Every time I turn around, you're with some waitress or a cashier. Do you even think about how that makes me feel? When I go shopping, I can see people thinking, 'Oh, look at Lacey. Her husband is with every woman he sees.' Maybe it's time I show them that I know what's going on and I'm going to do something about it." "It doesn't mean anything," he said softly. "You know I love you." "Yeah, Dean," I replied. "It means something. It means everyone thinks I'm not good enough for you. And it means I feel terrible every time you do it. Maybe we should just separate and find someone who makes us happy." "Are you saying we should swap partners?" he asked. "Like Jerry gets you and I get—" "No, that's not what I mean," I snapped. "I mean a real separation. We'd live apart and get divorced. I'm saying this to save my self-esteem. Not so you can be with Miranda, and if you even try to touch her, Jerry would hurt you." "Are you serious? I played football. You could hurt yourself trying to avoid him," I laughed. "But this isn't about Jerry. It's about you and me. You acted like I was a trophy in high school, but if you keep messing up, I'm going to leave. If I hear about one more woman, that will be it." "I get it," he said. "Dean, don't just hear me," I said. "Listen to me. If I still matter to you, you need to stop. Tonight is a new start for us, but it's the last chance." "Then it needs to go both ways," he said. "No more dancing on stage in crowded bars." "You got it," I smiled. "I hate that song," he grumbled. Over the next few days, things got really tense. Dean was cranky and followed me everywhere. I noticed that our love life, which was never strong, was suddenly different. Unfortunately, I didn't like it. Dean seemed to watch me closely, and any guy I talked to faced his jealous questions. "This works both ways," he warned. "If I even think you're cheating, I'll get back at you." Miranda. This had been the worst week ever. Jerry barely looked at me, and when he did, it was only if I was right in front of him. He wouldn't talk or let me explain. I tried writing letters and sending messages, but he wouldn't respond. I wanted to tell him it wasn't what he thought, but he wouldn't give me the chance. I hoped that at the bar, where we usually went, we could finally clear things up. I drove there alone because Jerry had been working late all week. That hurt because I loved having breakfast with him every morning. But what hurt more was the look on his face. Jerry looked like someone had betrayed him. My heart ached for him, but he still wouldn't talk to me. Suddenly, I noticed something strange. The way he looked at me felt different, as if I was just another thing he had. Jerry only used specific car cleaning products, and I remembered the year I gave him a cleaning kit. He smiled, but something felt off. One of his friends made a joke, saying those products were fine but not as good as his usual ones. Jerry had always treated me like I was special. But I finally realized my jealousy of Lacey came from my own thoughts. Jerry had always made me feel special. I wish I had seen that before all our problems started. I sat at our usual table. The guys in his band waved at me as I took my seat. Only Aaron and Jerry were missing. After waiting for nearly an hour, Jerry still hadn't shown up. Then Aaron walked in and told the band about a bad accident on the highway that had caused traffic jams. He had managed to get through on his motorcycle, but cars weren't moving at all. "Don't worry, Miranda. I saw Jerry's Mustang on the road. They're on their way here," Aaron said. "What do you mean they?" I asked. "Lacey Martin was with him in the car," Aaron said. "What did you just say?" Dean shouted from across the bar. He quickly crossed the room and towered over Aaron. "Jerry was giving Lacey a ride," Aaron repeated. "Bet she was giving him a ride," someone in the bar laughed. "Aaron, are you sure it was Lacey?" I asked, feeling uneasy. "Oh yeah," Aaron smirked. "Everyone knows that wild hair of hers." "That girl has her own car," Dean hissed. "I warned her to stay away." "What do you mean, Dean?" I asked, confused. "Nothing," he replied. But for the first time, he looked shaken. His usual confidence seemed shattered. If he had real feelings, I might have thought he was hurt. I pulled him to a smaller table. "I know Lacey's been mad at me," he confessed quietly. "I deserve it. I've cheated on her a lot. But ever since last week when I've kept my promise. I haven't cheated this time. It hurts, really badly." "I understand," I said, almost in tears. "Jerry's been upset with me for about a week." I didn't want to explain why. I didn't want anyone to know. Besides, Dean knew what had happened. He had been there. "Oh no," he said, upset. "This is revenge." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Jerry's mad at you. Lacey's mad at me. You don't like Lacey, and Jerry doesn't like me. It's perfect. If Jerry is really upset with you, what's the worst thing he could do to get back at you?" he explained. Suddenly, everything clicked. "I'm going to take her down," I said, angry. "No, you won't," he replied. "You'll be too busy picking up your husband's teeth off the floor." Then he stopped and looked at me seriously. "Let's not get angry. Let's get even." He quickly shared his plan for getting back at our partners. He thought we should have our own kind of revenge. I went to the office to ask Porky for help. Jerry, after a week of being mad at Miranda, I missed her. I thought it was time for us to sit down and talk things over like adults. I was ready to listen to her side, but if she had cheated on me, that would end things for us. Since she told me about her moment with Dean, I felt sick inside. The week had been hard. I got up, showered, and went straight to work. I dropped by the diner for breakfast so often that everyone there knew me. At work, I felt normal again. It was a good escape from my feelings, so I worked as long as I could. When I got home, I often ran and then made dinner for myself. I did this whether Miranda cooked or not. I wanted her to see that I didn't want to be around her. It hurt to think about a cruise I had booked for us before all this mess happened. I didn't want to be trapped on a boat with someone who had let me down. But on the other hand, I was finally ready to talk to her. I wasn't sure what to do. Maybe I had overreacted and everything wasn't as bad as I thought. But she knew how I felt about Dean. She must have known that doing anything with him would ruin us. It also bothered me how unfair she was. She got mad at me for dancing with Lacey while I was working, even though she and many others were there. Meanwhile, she was hiding something with Dean. Going on vacation together felt too risky. On my way home, I decided to see if I could cancel the cruise. I nearly forgot that it was my night to go to the bar. I left work late because of a problem on the shop floor that had to be fixed. I was somewhat relieved that Miranda and I were fighting because if we weren't, she would have called me by now. By the time I got out, it was almost 6 o'clock. I stopped by the travel agency. It felt more personal than canceling online. It's a small town, so face-to-face business is common. Mrs. Martin was just about to leave as I walked in. She had already put up her closed sign. "Hello, my favorite customer," she said. "Here to upgrade your trip?" "I'm actually here to cancel," I replied. "Things aren't going well for Miranda and me. Maybe now isn't the best time for us to go away." "Sorry to hear that," she said. It's after 5, so let me call the cruise line first thing in the morning and see what I can do. If I can't get them to cancel your trip, maybe I can help you move it to a later date, okay? Thanks, I said. What's that look for? She asked. I was just thinking if there will be a later date for us, I said. Of course there will, she smiled. You two are perfect for each other. That girl loves you so much. I wish my son's marriage was as strong as yours. She was so nice. I couldn't tell her that her son was part of the reason my marriage fell apart. As I turned to leave, she got a phone call. After a quick chat, she turned back to me. So, Jerry, can you help an old lady out? She smiled. Sure, where's the old lady? I asked. I'm talking about me, silly, she laughed. You're such a charming guy. No wonder Miranda loves you. My car's in the shop, she continued. My daughter-in-law was supposed to pick me up today, but she's running late. Could you drop me off at that bar where you and your friends hang out? Lacey or Dean can take me home from there. Sure, no problem, I said. We walked to the parking lot and I opened the door for her. Oh my, she said. This car is really nice. Too bad you're married. You could have a lot of ladies interested in you with this car. Are you making a joke, Mrs. Martin? I said. Ooh, you're smooth, she laughed. You're such a joker. We had been driving on the freeway for about 5 miles when we came upon a bad accident. The police had stopped traffic to one lane while they cleaned up the mess and did their work. There was still broken glass and pieces of metal all over the road. Everyone passing by had to slow down and look, which made things worse. Jerry, pull over, my passenger said suddenly. She was pointing to the side of the road where a couple of cars had stopped. There was a tow truck talking to a few people. She got out and walked over to the tow truck. I followed her and saw why she wanted to stop. One of the drivers waiting for the tow truck was Lacey. No wonder you couldn't pick me up, Mrs. Martin said to Lacey. Lacey hugged her mother-in-law warmly. Hi, Jerry, she said with a friendly smile. Is this your day to save ladies in trouble? I nodded nervously and she laughed. Our eyes met and it felt like she could read my thoughts. Oh, come on, Jerry, even she wouldn't expect you to leave me here, she smiled. I'll sit in the back. My mother-in-law can have the front seat. I couldn't help but laugh. What's so funny? She asked. It's a good thing you're small, I said. I don't think my back seat was made for grown-ups. Less than 20 minutes later, we parked outside the boar's nest. I had to help Lacey out of the back seat. Mrs. Martin walked over to Dean's car. I think the ride was a bit much for her. Lacey said she would get Dean right away. I hugged Mrs. Martin and went into the bar to find Miranda. I knew something was off as soon as I walked in. Lacey was standing in front of one of Porky's private rooms. If he's in there with some other girl, it's over, she yelled, banging on the door. A few minutes later, Dean opened the door. The look on his face showed he knew he was caught. I felt like laughing, but I didn't. Deep down, I was glad he was about to get what he deserved. Maybe Lacey would finally leave him. But then I felt a rush of fear. If things ended between them, would he go after Miranda? Lacey was crying and shouting at Dean. Nothing happened, Lace, Dean yelled, trying to dodge her small but strong blows. Lacey was tiny, but she was strong from being a cheerleader. Suddenly, Lacey got behind Dean and yelled at the woman hiding in the room, "Come out of there!" She stopped and her mouth dropped open in shock. She turned and looked into my eyes. The look on her face changed from anger to sadness and understanding. I wondered what was happening in that room. All the pain I felt the week before vanished the moment Miranda came into view. Dean smiled at me. I hope it was worth it, jerk, he sneered. I don't care what you two were doing because I got even. I told you last week what would happen. Lacey isn't that great in bed. She doesn't even enjoy it. Miranda, on the other hand, you're a lucky man. She just loves to... Before he could say more, I was on him. His size didn't matter next to my anger. My first punch almost knocked him out. He stumbled back, trying to speak. Stop. Was just... He mumbled as I kept hitting him wherever I could. He tried to shield himself, but it didn't help against my relentless punches. Forget it, I said. You're not worth it. I looked across the bar and saw Miranda. She's not worth it either. You can have her. Miranda, I really don't know what had been going through my mind. Maybe it was the same thing that always comes up when I'm angry or jealous. Pure rage. I wasn't thinking straight when I let Dean drag me into his plan for revenge. Dean thought Lacey would try to get back at him for cheating, and he was sure she would do it with Jerry. Once we heard about those two getting in a car together, our imaginations went wild. I guess my plan wasn't very smart. Looking back, it felt like something a high school kid would think of. How was making Jerry feel jealous going to help my marriage? I was foolish. I promised myself I wouldn't make any more decisions when I was angry. But seeing those two faces made me realize how wrong I was. First, I saw Lacey. I really looked at her. When I put away my jealousy and doubts, I could see she really was as pretty as people said. Secondly, I noticed how much she was like Jerry in some ways. She was honest, kind, and had no bad intentions. She was just a woman like me. I remembered all the times over the past 4 years when she tried to be my friend. I realized I was the one making things complicated, not her. Lacey and I could have been good friends, but my jealousy ruined that chance. I moved to this town to fix my life, but I brought all my worries and problems with me. I thought in a small town like this I would have my pick of men. Back in the big city I came from, I was just another face in the crowd. That got me into trouble. There were many mean women who tried to speak badly about me because of how I looked. I ended up making bad choices with someone I shouldn't have been with. It became clear he wouldn't marry me, and I wasn't ready to be a mother on my own. He paid for the procedure, but even though I wanted to keep it private, soon everyone in town knew. I had to leave to start fresh. I came here to stay with my aunt, but somehow became as mean as the women from my old town. I changed myself into the kind of person I didn't want to be. I wanted to reach out to Lacey and apologize, but there was no time. My eyes quickly found Jerry as soon as he walked in. Looking at him made my stomach turn. I felt weak. Jerry had been upset with me recently and ignored me. The whole reason I tried to make him jealous was now backfiring. Jerry was not just jealous, he was furious. I couldn't believe what was happening. Jerry was so angry he started fighting Dean. Years of taking him lightly had led to this moment. Suddenly, Jerry stopped. He said Dean wasn't worth it, and then he said something that nearly broke me. He said I wasn't worth it either, and that Dean could have me. My heart raced so fast I felt like I couldn't breathe. Jerry was walking away, and everything felt worse than before. I looked around and saw that everyone was staring at me, showing the same disgust I felt when I left my last town. Some waitresses were trying to help Dean up. His face was bruised and looked terrible. He didn't even look at me but cried out, "Lacey, wait! You don't understand!" "That's just it, Dean," she replied coldly. "I finally do understand. I waited too long for something that would never happen. Goodbye, Dean." She took off her wedding ring and it hurt her deeply. She threw it at Dean's feet and ran after my husband, calling out for him. I held onto my wedding ring to keep it safe. I stood up quickly and ran after them. But by the time I reached the door, I heard Jerry's car speeding away. Tears filled my eyes. Jerry was everything to me. My jealousy and anger might have just ruined my marriage. Then I felt someone touch my shoulder gently. I turned and started to cry. A woman hugged me like I was her own child and comforted me until I calmed down. Dean was trying to stand up and groaned. The woman comforting me stopped. "Dean, what happened?" she asked, worried. I looked up and saw she was Mary Martin, Dean's mom. "It's a long story, Mom," Dean said. "I wanted to teach a lesson to someone bothering married women, but it backfired. He didn't act as I thought he would." Mary looked at him, confused. "And before you could explain, he just started hitting you? So who was this guy?" she asked. "And does this have anything to do with the rumors about you cheating on Lacey?" "It was Jerry, the guy I went to school with. He's always jealous of me," Dean spat. "Your daughter-in-law is likely cheating with him. They were together in his car tonight, and—" "Why are you laughing, Mom?" "Because there's no way anything could happen in that car. It's too small. And once again, you're acting foolishly. Jerry drove me here, silly. We picked up Lacey on the way. He wouldn't leave your wife on the road. He was scared of what you and Miranda would think. But I was there. They barely spoke. There's nothing going on between them. The only thing they share is that they're both really nice people." I started screaming then. I felt like I had ruined my marriage for no reason at all. Dean looked very sick, like he might throw up. Lacey ran to catch up with Jerry. To my surprise, I didn't feel upset. It was as if I had known deep down that Dean could never be loyal to me. Part of me always thought he would cheat again. The only shock was who he cheated with. I had always believed that Miranda cared too much for Jerry to ever cheat. Sure, she got very jealous, but I thought she was more likely to hurt someone for getting too close to him than to cheat herself. When we reached the car, I knocked on the window and Jerry unlocked the door. "I can take you wherever you want, Lacey," he said. His voice was shaky, and I could see he was trying to keep his feelings together. "Where are you going?" I asked. "I don't know," he said slowly. "I guess just away from here." "Hey, that's where I'm going too," I smiled. He shrugged and drove down the road. For a while, he just stayed quiet, but I could sense what he was thinking. "It's not your fault, Jerry," I told him. "It's Dean's fault. He could be a good guy, but there's something inside him that makes him forget he's just like everyone else. He thinks he can take whatever he wants without waiting or asking. And I have no clue what drives Miranda. I tried many times to be friends with her, but she only seems to care about you. She gets really mad if any woman looks at you. At the same time, she makes it clear she doesn't want any men around. Have you ever seen what happens when a guy she doesn't know tries to flirt with her?" "Yeah, I've seen it a few times," he smiled. "That's why this is so strange," I said. "I really believe Dean somehow convinced her to cheat while she was extremely angry, thinking we were doing something." "It doesn't matter," he said. "She did it. The reasons don't change what happened. I've heard a lot about Dean, but I've never heard he was a bad person. Miranda made her choice. I'm used to picking up the pieces and trying to move forward. I just feel bad for what this does to you." "Aren't we in the same boat?" I asked. He looked at me again with a slight smile. "I'm used to working hard and still ending up second place," he shrugged. "But I'm what?" I asked. "You know, you're Lacey. You're special," he said. "Jerry, I wish people didn't act like that," I said angrily. "Did you know that until I turned 16, my brother called me ugly every single day, even when all his friends wanted to date me? I've always admired how you set a goal and worked diligently for it. For most of my life, I just sat around and hoped for things to come my way. Dean is the same. The only difference is he can usually talk himself into getting what he wants." As I looked out the window, I suddenly realized where we were going. He drove up a long driveway and through an open gate into a lovely yard. I saw a small but beautiful swimming pool surrounded by neat grass. Colorful flowers grew around the pool, and there were stone stairs leading up to a stunning wooden deck. I got out of the car and looked around in wonder. A tall fence surrounded the yard, covered in ivy and climbing plants. There were hanging plant holders placed nicely all around. There was a hammock on the grass beneath a willow tree. On the deck, 2 lounge chairs sat side by side with small tables beside them. The layout was unusual, and it took me a moment to understand why. Usually there would be one small table between the chairs, but this setup showed the person who designed it wanted a lot of space between the 2 chairs. There was an umbrella table on the deck with 6 chairs around it. A nice grill was nearby, along with an outdoor bar just a few feet away. It wasn't the yard I had always dreamed of, but only because my dreams weren't this good. The way the flowers and plants were arranged took years to create. Most of them would bloom every year, but planting and caring for them took a lot of time and affection. That's what I felt most in this yard. Love. The whole place was arranged by someone who enjoyed spending their time with the person they cared for. "I love what you've done with your yard," I said as we walked toward the house. "Miranda did most of it," he said. "We built the deck and put up the fence together, but the plants, the furniture, and the overall look is all her. If I thought the yard was beautiful, the house was even more amazing. It looked like something from a fancy home magazine. I had heard about the house from friends, but seeing it was different. It just didn't make sense. Anyone who loved their partner enough to create something like this would never cheat. Everywhere I looked, there were pairs of everything. Everything she did was for the 2 of them. I wondered what would happen if they ever had kids. While I admired the place, Jerry ran upstairs and came back down with a suitcase and a duffel bag. We were definitely leaving. "Your place?" he asked. I didn't understand what he meant. "Jerry, can I stay with you for a bit?" I asked. "I don't want to go home." "You're going to need some clothes and a few things for a few days," he said. "We should get them before they go back home. I came here first because I thought Dean would need to take his mom home first." Next, we drove to my place. Honestly, I was a bit ashamed for him to see where I lived. The yard. Even our condo looked messy next to his nice house. After seeing his place, I would probably rather live in Jerry's garage than my own home. "I'm not sure how long we have," he said. "I'll park down the street so he won't see me. If he comes back and you decide to stay, blink the lights off and on. If you want to leave, just take the back way and we'll go as soon as you're ready." I nodded and hurried into the building. It was hard not to kiss him, but I felt that he wasn't ready for that yet. As confident as he seemed, I had to remember this was new for him. It was the first time he had been cheated on. I had gone through it many times. I was used to it. But this time was different. This felt final. Instead of just telling Dean how mad I was and waiting a few days, I was actually doing something about it. I had left him. As I packed some clothes, I thought about how much of this was about me leaving and how much was just following Jerry. It felt right. Didn't I deserve more than a man who cheated on me whenever he wanted? I had told Dean that the waitress was his last chance to cheat on me, but part of me hoped Dean would show up. I wanted him to see me leaving him. I wanted him to feel the hurt of watching me walk out the door with someone else. I wanted him to feel the way I did every time he betrayed me. Yet I sensed it wouldn't have mattered. Dean was a cheater. He wouldn't like being on the other side. I had forgiven him many times, but if I ever cheated on him, I knew he would leave. Dean had too much pride to handle that. I was pretty sure that right then, he was trying to find a way to explain how a smaller guy had beaten him up in front of his friends. From what I saw, other than trying to defend himself, Dean hadn't done much. Looking back, I decided that meeting was a tie. Dean had cheated with Miranda, but then Jerry had beaten Dean. I didn't know how Dean treated Miranda, but I knew Jerry had shown Dean he was not to be messed with. I had hoped Dean would see me go, but he never came. I was in and out of my condo in under 10 minutes. Jerry seemed to have a plan because he drove right onto the freeway and looked like he knew where he was going. I settled into the soft leather seat and tried to sleep. Jerry didn't seem like he wanted to talk. I woke up to find us speeding down the highway. The Mustang's engine roared as we sped along. Jerry was listening to talk radio about sports. The hosts were discussing if the Lions could win or even make it to the Super Bowl. I looked out the window and noticed we were driving around a big lake. Jerry smiled at me when he saw I was awake. I yawned and smiled back. "It looks different here," I said. "Where are we?" "Shrewsbury," he said. "Shrewsbury. I've never heard of a Shrewsbury in Michigan or Ohio," I said. "Me neither," he smirked. "Shrewsbury is in Ontario, Lacey. We're in Canada. My dad has a house here for fishing. I haven't been here since I was a teenager. One of the neighbors cuts my dad's grass. He's going to give us the keys." Suddenly, the Mustang slowed down. It was funny how the car seemed to like going fast. We drove into a parking lot near a small grocery store. I got out of the car and followed Jerry inside. The store was neat and stocked. We bought enough food to last us a few days, snacks and drinks. I noticed Jerry didn't buy any beer or alcohol. We loaded the food in the back seat on top of our bags. I missed my own car. It wasn't as fast or fancy as Jerry's Mustang, but it had more room and a better ride. Jerry would say his car was better, but I felt every bump in the Mustang. The drive to the house was very short. The house was nice. We put the food away, but before I could say anything about our issues, Jerry started talking. "Lace, we're both tired," he said. "There are 2 bedrooms in back. I'll take the one on the left. It's bigger, but the bed isn't as comfortable. We can talk in the morning." I said. "I need a shower first." I walked toward the bathroom and glanced back. I laughed when I saw he looked nervous, as if I had asked him to join me. It was kind of funny that someone who claimed to have liked me for a long time didn't want to see me without clothes. The place must have been empty for a while because it took a long time for the hot water to come out. When it finally did, I had to admit the shower was better than the one in my condo. I stood there, letting the water wash away my worries. Then I remembered that all my clothes were still in the car. We had only taken out the food to stop it from going bad. I wrapped a towel around myself and walked to the front door. The suitcases were in the living room. Jerry had brought them inside. I dropped the towel and put on clean underwear and a bra. Then I found some comfy sweatpants and one of my favorite t-shirts. "Do you always change clothes where anyone can see you?" Jerry asked. "I knew you wouldn't do anything rude," I replied. "And if you wanted to see me, so what?" Besides, anything I have, your wife has more of and probably looks better in. You're both beautiful, he said. But she was... She was what? I asked. Built like a tank? I've heard that a lot. My ex-husband said the same kind of things. Another guy called her sex on two legs. It's the same old story, Jerry. Men seem to have two kinds of perfect women. The first is the pure, untouchable princess you want to marry. The second is the wild, sexy woman you want to sleep with. I can be sexy, but no one ever gives me the chance. And your wife is lovely, but no one notices her. If she's such a goddess, why hasn't she been with anyone else but you until now? He looked at me, but didn't say anything. I could see he was thinking about what I said. Dean is supposed to be the tough guy in town, I added. And you're the nice guy. He didn't seem so tough when you fought him last night. It's funny how we're all stuck in the roles everyone expects us to play. But now we've all broken free. Dean got beaten up. You got rough with someone. Miranda's heart got hurt. Yeah, everyone changed roles except you, Lace, he said. Oh yeah, honey, I told him. Before we leave here, I'm going to take care of you. The look on his face made me laugh. Good night, Jer, I said sweetly. The bed was really soft, but I still couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned for a while, then decided to check if Jerry was awake and wanted to talk. He was still asleep, but being near him made me feel calm. So I slipped into bed with him. It felt a little strange, but also nice. I felt safe and warm. It was comforting. Except for my dad, I had never been in a bed with any man other than Dean. Before long, I was fast asleep. Miranda. You have to go home, Miranda, he said. You can't stay here. I'm locking up. I was sitting in Porky's office crying. It was late, and I'd been crying and thinking all night. Honestly, I was scared to go home. I'm scared, Porky, I said. He laughed a bit. Miranda, I've known you since you came to this town, he said. But I've known Jerry all his life. I doubt he's ever raised his voice at you, let alone put his hands on you. You have nothing to fear. Jerry loves you. Except he thinks... Porky, I've always looked like this, I said. When I was younger, it got me into trouble before I understood it all. Men see me and think only of one thing. It's like all they care about is using me. They just want to brag to their friends. I feel like a body to them with no thoughts or feelings. Jerry is the only one who treats me differently. Jerry loves me, and I love him. He has never treated me like that. Miranda, I think you're being a little dramatic, he laughed. I remember many times you both almost left the bar in a rush. I've seen you two close together so often, I thought you'd end up in one of those booths. I find it hard to believe. I didn't say we've never been together, I laughed. Jerry makes love to me. It feels sweet and wonderful. He makes me feel special in a way that's not just about physical things. So go home, Miranda, he said. Talk to him. Tell him how you feel. You both belong together. Porky, I'm afraid that after tonight he'll tell me to leave. That would break my heart. I can handle him being upset with me as long as we're together. But I can't bear being without him, I said. Jerry is a very good man, Miranda, he replied. Just give him some time and talk honestly, but be careful. It's hard to make Jerry angry, but when he gets there, it's serious. I don't understand half of what women do, but after what it did to Dean, I wouldn't push it. I got in my car and drove home. As soon as I walked in, I knew Jerry wasn't home. Home. Was that what this place was? Without Jerry, the house felt empty. It was just a box for my things. I got into bed and turned on the TV. I wasn't a big fan of late-night shows, but I figured I'd watch something until Jerry got home. All the shows seemed the same, just bad copies of the late-night talk shows. Maybe they were acting a bit crazier like everyone else these days, but it was just like what Johnny Carson did when I was a kid. It was dull. Then I felt something strange. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. The table on Jerry's side of the bed was empty. It was never empty. His iPad was always there. Sometimes he took it to work, but most of the time it was there. He could browse the internet or play his silly racing game while we were in bed. Whenever we watched one of Jerry's shows, the iPad was on the table, but as soon as we switched to one of mine, he picked it up. And now it was just gone. I jumped out of bed and opened the closet. Many of Jerry's work suits were missing. His favorite running shoes were also gone. I opened his drawers, and they were nearly empty, too. Most of his favorite things were gone. Jerry had left me. I stood there, staring at the empty drawers, and tears started to fall again. It seemed he had left behind everything he didn't truly need. He left the clothes that weren't essential. He left the tools and gadgets he didn't have to keep. And he left me, too. The realization hit me hard. As bad as last week was, with Jerry ignoring me, this felt worse. My heart raced and I struggled to breathe. At that moment, the phone on the table rang. I answered it right away. "Jerry, I'm sorry. I'll do anything you want. Please come home. I need you," I started to say. "Oh no, this is really bad. Please don't tell me your husband is gone too," he said. "I was hoping he might know where Lacey is. None of her friends know where she went. All they said was they were glad she finally got away from me. This is bad. Our plan really backfired." "You mean your plan, jerk?" I snapped back. "Well, luckily, your change to my plan might help us," he said. "If we can find them and explain everything," I replied. "We need to work together on this," he told me. "We don't need to do anything," I shot back. "This part of we wishes she had never seen you or your little princess of a wife. Just a week ago, I was the happiest woman. My troubles started when your wife jumped on stage and danced all over my husband while you stared at that waitress. It's all been a mess since then. So please just leave me alone." "How are you going to find him without me?" he asked. "I'll call him," I said. "He has this magical phone that lets me reach him anytime, anywhere. I think they call it an iPhone." "Has that worked for you so far?" he questioned. "I've been too scared to call him," I admitted. "Well, while you gather your courage, he might be looking for a divorce lawyer," he said. "The only one who could help you will be busy with his own problems." "What do you think I should do?" I asked. "I'm not sure about you," he said, his smirk clear in his voice. I wanted to reach through the phone and hit him. "But we should talk to my mom in the morning." "Why?" I asked. "She was the last person to talk to them before everything went wrong," he explained. "She's also on good terms with both of them, so maybe she can call them. They probably won't hang up on her like they would us." "That sounds like a good plan," I said. "Why don't you call her first thing in the morning and we can meet for breakfast at the diner?" "Sounds good," he replied. "See you there at 8. I wish I could say I fell asleep, but sleep didn't come. I finally got out of bed because it felt strange without Jerry there. I managed to relax on the sofa in the living room. Each time I tried to sleep, I thought of all the silly things I had done. I finally understood why wedding vows say for better or for worse. It's just like math. The worst turns into better. My life was good. It was great. I thought that by keeping Jerry away from other women around us, I was making our life better. But somehow, when you try to make something better, it can end up worse. I walked into the diner a few minutes after 8. The jerk was there, but so was his mom, so I had to behave. Dean and his mother looked a lot alike. She was a nice-looking woman, and Dean, even though he was big, had soft-looking features. Maybe that's why some women found him attractive. But his charm didn't work on me. Before I moved here, I had met many people like him. I quickly learned that every town has its own jerk. No matter how pretty or nice a place is, there's always one. Dean was that jerk in this town, and I wished I hadn't met him before Jerry. "So, Dean says you guys are caught up in a misunderstanding," she said. That's all it took. I started crying again. She came over and hugged me. "We're in trouble, Miranda," said Dean. "My mom doesn't want to get involved. She thinks I caused this." "I can help," she said. "Can't you see how upset she is? But you, Dino, I think you somehow caused this, and if so, you deserve what happens." "Mom, come on," Dean sighed. "It was all just a misunderstanding. I thought that someone had done something wrong, but it turned out they hadn't. What I wanted them to believe I did was based on my mistake about what they did. Now that I know they didn't do it, it makes things worse for me. It's bad because I almost acted on what they thought I did. The only reason things might get better is that the person I wanted to do that with wouldn't do it with me." "Yeah," she said. "I figured it out after talking to some people last night. You've been unfaithful to Lacey again, and she's finally had enough. From what I heard, you flirted with a waitress at Porky's right in front of your wife. You didn't even try to stop it or leave. Lacey showed you she could get attention from other people if you wouldn't pay her any. I heard she got on stage and danced like crazy." "Exactly," Dean said angrily. "I don't like my wife acting that way." "Maybe you should stop acting that way yourself," his mom replied. "You are supposed to be partners in marriage. If you can do something, she can too. You're being foolish if you can't see she just wanted some attention. If she wanted to get back at you, she wouldn't have done it in public. She would have gone off with another guy and kept it a secret. You know, like you do with other girls? Nothing, Dean said, changing his mind. Think again, Dean, his mom said. Who is the safest guy you can think of? What? Asked Dean. Think about it, she said. Most guys would notice how pretty Lacey is. If she was out there flirting with one of them, who would you choose? What guy would ignore her, no matter how much she tried to flirt? She looked at me then. That's where you come in, Miranda, she said. Lacey picked Jerry for 2 reasons. First, he's a nice guy and has always liked her. Second, he's Dean's best friend. That's not true, Mom, Dean said. We always fought over everything and were never friends. That's because you were too blind to see it, she said. How many of your so-called friends did you fight with because they liked Lacey? A lot, Dean said angrily. Guys get stupid over her. Some even told her things I did. Others waited for us to fight and went after her. All that time, Jerry had a crush on her but never tried to talk to her because he respected your relationship. That's a real friend, unlike those guys who betrayed you when they could. I guess I didn't see it that way, Dean admitted. And what about you, Miranda? Lacey has wanted to be friends with you but has been shut out. Why is that? She's so pretty, and I thought, I started to say. Miranda, you're not ugly either, she said. You two have so much in common. Your experiences with guys are probably similar. I thought she only wanted to be friends with me to get closer to Jerry, I said. Miranda, I don't know you well, but I like you a lot. So hear me out, she said. I nodded. You're being foolish, she said firmly. You act like you don't know how much Jerry cares about you. With my clueless son married to Lacey, Jerry could have had anyone he wanted in town, but he chose you over all of them. When he met you, he could have waited for Dean to cheat and gone after Lacey instead. But he didn't. Everyone knows everyone's business here. He knew about Dean cheating. Honey, if Jerry wanted Lacey, he could have gone after her. Instead, he chose you, and you two ended up together. Lacey has never been a threat to you, only in your mind. Back to you, Dean, she said. Do you see why Lacey was flirting with Jerry? She wasn't doing it for him. She wanted you to notice her. She was saying, look at me, Dean, I can be attractive too. I can find someone else. Then why did they leave together? I asked. We don't know that yet, she said, and we hope they didn't. Why would we want that, Mom? Dean asked. She slapped his forehead before either of us could react. Have you been paying attention? She asked angrily. You both are close to losing the ones you love because you're not thinking, she said. Both of them are hurting. When people are in pain, they can do silly things. If they're alone and hurt, they might do even more stupid things. She shook her head. Dean, you've cheated on Lacey a few times, she continued. Maybe we need to talk about why that is later. For now, let's focus on getting her back. Do you really want Lacey out there by herself, feeling how she probably feels? Her self-esteem can't be high right now. You even cheated on her with someone who wasn't attractive. So, what happens when a charming guy says a few nice things that make her feel special? Do you want her to be alone, or do you want her to help Jerry get through what you and Miranda did to them? But we didn't do anything, I said to her. Jerry doesn't know that, dear, she replied. He feels hurt and let down by someone he cares about. It's going to be hard to make him believe nothing happened. And Dean, Lacey won't believe anything you say. If they're together, that's the best chance we have. She quickly finished her food while Dean and I sat in silence, lost in our thoughts. Okay, it's still early. They probably won't sleep well after last night. I'll wait until 10 or 11 to call them, she said. I'll take it step by step. First, I'll check how they're feeling and if they are together. The next time I call, I'll add how sorry you both are and how it was a bad choice. After that, I'll start suggesting they reach out to you or come home. That could take days, at least one more day, I replied. Miranda, use this time apart to think about what you want to say and how you will do things differently, she told me. With that, she got up and walked to her office. I thought about what she said and decided to do exactly that. I felt even more determined to win Jerry back. I also stood up and left the table without saying a word to Dean. Jerry, before I opened my eyes, I felt a bit worried. There was a soft snore next to me. It was cute, but Miranda didn't snore. Then I remembered that I had left her. My eyes flew open and I saw Lacey beside me. Even asleep, she looked beautiful, maybe even more than usual. Her face looked relaxed, not stressed by everything going on. Without the worry lines, her skin and features were amazing to see. I had seen her many times before, but lying here next to her felt like a dream come true. Sadly, it was a dream I could never have because I was still married. Thinking about it turned my feelings into sadness. A dream you can only look at and can't touch is just painful. So, what's on your mind? Her voice was a bit rough, but strangely nice. I thought we slept in different rooms, I said. That's not the point, she replied. There have been enough lies around here lately, Jerry. All right, I was thinking about how beautiful you are, even asleep, I told her. But I'm sure you've heard that a lot. But I've never heard it from you, she smiled. And Jerry, coming from you, it means much more. Everyone knows you're honest. So if you say it, you really mean it. You're not just saying it to impress me. I have always thought you were beautiful, I admitted. So, Jerry, why did you never tell me? She asked. We have hardly spoken all these years, except for a few polite greetings. We have known each other since we were 5, and this is more than we've said. Well, this is the first time we've been this close, I said nervously. Whose fault is that? She asked. Lacey, it's nobody's fault, I replied. You've been with Dean since we were kids. Dean and I started dating when we were 13, she said, and we didn't sleep together until after we got married. I tried to date other people a few times, but he never agreed. No one else asked me out either. No one else was brave enough, I joked. Dean was one of the toughest guys. He made it clear that anyone who looked at you would get hurt, and even if they were not scared of his threats, they still knew you and Dean were the royalty of the popular crowd. Anyone who tried to be close to you would be shunned. But Jerry, you were popular too, she said. You didn't need to rely on us. All the girls I talked to who dated you loved it. Many were upset when you got serious with Miranda. They think she just came in and took you away. I smiled at that idea. Do you see that? She pointed at me. I want that. I dream of that. What are you talking about? I asked, confused. That look on your face, she said. That dreamy look when I said her name. Dean never looks at me like that. He thinks he owns me, so he takes me for granted. So, what about breakfast? I asked to change the topic. I hope Miranda knows how lucky she is, she said. You mean how lucky she was, I replied. It's over. Once we get back, I'm starting the divorce. Lacey didn't believe him. His love for her was clear on his face. I was sure that, no matter what happened, he would eventually return to her. And as bad as it sounded, I decided that this time, I would do what I wanted. Well, we both need to think about what we will do, I said. We need to take a few days to think things over. This way we can avoid making decisions based just on our feelings that we might regret later, I said. How do we do that? He asked. We just relax and do whatever makes us happy, I replied. Let's forget about that night for now. We need to clear our minds. Then we can look back on it later without anger affecting how we think. So how do we start? He asked again, showing curiosity. Take me for a walk in the woods, I said. He nodded, and we both went to our rooms to grab better clothes for walking. It was a beautiful morning. We walked through the nearby woods, talking sometimes and enjoying the peace at other times. It was easy for me to push aside what Dean had done once again. I had done this before, but this time felt different. I usually fought to stay mad at Dean, but then I would end up giving in. He cheated, and nothing changed. Maybe that's why he kept doing it. But this time I had taken action, and it felt good knowing that he was at home, wondering what I was doing. As the morning went on, I found myself doing things I hadn't done before. I loved the changes I saw. Dean either took me for granted or never really appreciated me. But with Jerry, it was different. I felt like I had him wrapped around my finger without much effort. I could easily catch Jerry's attention with simple things. I would twirl my hair, and he would stare, getting so lost in watching me that he nearly lost his balance. If I looked back over my shoulder at him, he would walk right into a tree. It felt too easy, and it made me feel beautiful. I wondered if Danny made him feel the same way, or if he had grown used to her just like Dean had with me. But I doubted it. Danny and Dean always seemed to be close, holding hands and touching. Jerry stared at me as if he was dreaming, but he avoided touching me as if it was a big deal. I think he was following that saying about looking but not touching. I also thought he was confused. On one hand, he had a big crush on me that started before he met Danny. But on the other hand, he was married to her and clearly loved her. I was a fantasy to him, but he was committed to reality. The only reason I was so close to him was that he felt hurt and angry about what Danny had done with my husband. Normally, I wouldn't have had a chance. I decided to see how far I could take this. By the time we walked back to the house, we were both hungry. We decided to grab something to eat in town instead of cooking. I felt like Jerry didn't want to be alone with me, which made me happy. I was used to men wanting to be with me without feeling any fear. This felt fresh. For the first time, I felt like I was seen differently. Instead of just being pretty, I was a woman to be noticed. Just thinking about it excited me in a way Dean never had. Dean and I had moments together, but things had changed since our honeymoon. He would give me an act of intimacy now and then, but focused most of his time on other women. My lack of experience was something he didn't know how to handle. He seemed to believe in the idea that wives were for marriage and other women were for fun. Meanwhile, I put up with him to keep our marriage together, hoping that if I let him use me, he wouldn't stray. But Jerry had me fired up. I thought that if he tried anything, I might just let him. Honestly, it felt stronger than anything with Dean. Jerry's simple attention and kindness sparked feelings in me that Dean had never reached. As he watched me shyly across the table, my feelings grew stronger. Whenever our eyes met, I felt a buzz of excitement. I couldn't remember what we had for lunch, but I do recall telling him I was full and asking what we should do next. I laughed as he fumbled and dropped his fork, his face shocked when he suggested going to a movie. That in itself was an adventure. Throughout the day, I felt pampered by how Jerry opened car doors for me and pulled out my chair. These were little kinds of kindness Dean seemed to forget about. When we got to the movie theater and Jerry asked what I wanted to see, I was surprised. I was so used to waiting for movies to come out on DVD that I felt excited. I picked a scary horror movie without any real reason. We weren't hungry since we had just eaten, but Jerry recommended soda and chocolate. I looked at him playfully, knowing well that half of our school knew about my love for chocolate. As the movie began, I quickly took one of Jerry's arms and wrapped it around me. At first, he was stiff, almost like he feared touching me. As the movie went on, I noticed he started to relax. His arm, which once felt stiff and strong, was now warm and cozy. I felt safe and cared for whenever he pulled me close, especially during the scary parts of the film when I squeezed his arm and pretended to be frightened. To be honest, nothing on the screen was scarier than my real life. A man in a mask chasing teenagers I didn't know? Not scary. The real fear was worrying that my husband, who hardly made enough money, might have gotten another girl pregnant in town. That was truly scary. I wasn't really watching the movie. I was soaking in the moment and the feelings around me. I thought about what I wanted from this night. I realized I was no longer innocent. I had changed and become someone stronger and less fragile. At 26, the fairy tale princess was finally awake. I saw that even though I was living a fantasy, it wasn't my own. I was in Dean's dream, where he made all the rules and had all the fun. Dean got to be married to the princess and flirt with other girls, too. I had ended up with a pretty bad prince. Maybe the fairy tale was wrong. Maybe when the princess kisses the frog, she doesn't turn him into a prince. Maybe the frog just tricked her into believing he was one. Now the princess was stuck with a frog pretending to be a prince, showing his true self with everything he did. Meanwhile, the real prince had married someone else. Dean had always made sure I couldn't date anyone while we grew up. He scared off anyone who thought of asking me out. Because of him, I lost the chance to find out if someone else was better for me. Dean had taken away my life. As I sat in that movie theater with Jerry holding me close, all kinds of thoughts flooded my mind. Jerry, even after Dean had taken the Homecoming King title from him, never seemed to care. It was strange that it mattered to me now. If feeling Jerry's arm around me made me feel this way, how would I have felt if we had ever danced together at the homecoming celebration? Just sitting next to him in the theater made me feel things I had never felt before. I wanted to hold his hand and make him touch me, but I knew that wasn't realistic. I knew I had to set practical goals. What I dreamed of and what was possible were very different. In a perfect world, I could divorce Dean and Miranda could disappear. But I faced reality. We didn't have enough money for a divorce, and if I even looked at Jerry, Miranda would hurt me. I could see that Miranda was tough. I had no doubt about that. Jerry was lean and strong in a way, but Dean was big and muscular. People would usually think Dean could easily win a fight, but that night proved how wrong they were. Jerry had easily beaten Dean without breaking a sweat. I worked out and ran a lot, but I knew Miranda could handle me easily. But if it meant I could be with Jerry, I would fight her. The problem was that it would be pointless. Jerry loved Miranda. I might be his dream girl, but she was his real-life partner. In my fantasy, Dean had to stay alive to see Jerry and me fall in love, but Miranda had to go, or at least move far away. If Miranda was around, I would have no chance with Jerry. That was the highest level of my dream, probably unreachable. The next step was a long affair that lasted until our spouses were gone and we could finally be together. We could keep it a secret, and everyone would be happy. Jerry and I could be together. Miranda would keep living her life with Jerry, and Dean could distract himself with other girls while I looked the other way. But that wouldn't work either. Miranda kept too close of an eye on Jerry. I heard that she made his lunches and took them to him at work, joining him almost every day. And she called him right after his shift. They did everything together. If he washed his car, she was right there. If he worked on it, she was under it helping him. If she even suspected I liked Jerry, I would be in trouble. The other reason it wouldn't work was that Jerry was too honest and too kind to cheat. The last level of my fantasy was to charm Jerry and enjoy whatever time we had together before facing reality again. In a perfect world, it would be our special secret. It would be a nice memory for both of us to think back on from time to time, especially when things got tough. Dean and Miranda would never find out. But if they did find out, maybe Miranda would be mad at me. Still, if I got the chance to be close to Jerry, I would take it. That's why I put his arm around me in the first place. The movie ended, and the lights came on. I was so into holding Jerry's arm that I hardly noticed it was over. "You know, that was a pretty good movie," he said with a smile. "I had a great time." "I'm really glad I saw it with you," I replied honestly. I was scared the whole time. I loved seeing the glow in his eyes. I could never forget the way he looked at me. Then I noticed him looking around and biting his lip. That look reminded me of Dean. He would always check to see if people noticed us when we were together. I didn't expect Jerry to act like that, but if he wanted to pretend we were a couple, it wouldn't take much pretending. "Lacey, are you cold?" he asked. As he spoke, he took off his outer shirt and wrapped it around me. I looked down and realized my body was reacting to Jerry. My shirt was thin, and it showed my body's response. "Well, maybe it's more than being cold," I said. "Sorry, Jerry. My body isn't as big as your wife's, but I have a strong reaction." He frowned, and I realized I had messed up. "Sorry again," I said. "We were enjoying ourselves, leaving our problems behind until I brought that up. I won't say that again." "It's okay, Lace," he smiled. "We can start fresh. Jerry, did you bring many shirts with you?" I asked to change the subject. He looked at me puzzled. "A few," he replied. "Good," I told him, "because I'm keeping this one." The rest of the afternoon felt like a great high school date. The only difference was we were both married to other people. We went to a nearby lake and watched people fishing and boating. I took my shoes off and walked into the shallow water. I splashed Jerry and he chased me, catching me and pulling me onto the soft grass near the beach. I pretended to fight him off, but really I was giving in. He rolled on top of me. We were both laughing, and I could feel the tension between us. It felt like he was going to kiss me right there by the lake. And if he did, I would not stop him. But just as our lips were about to meet, he froze. I lay there so close to a kiss, with my lips ready and realizing it wasn't going to happen. "Sorry," he said. "I don't know what happened. I guess we were just having too much fun." "Maybe it's something in the water," I smiled. I felt it too. "It'll be dark soon," he said, helping me up. "We should head back to the house." "Sounds good to me," I said. And it did. We had gotten so close that it felt like we might have kissed on a public beach. Back at the house, alone, anything could happen. "Miranda, sometimes moments like this make everything clear," even what never made sense before. Like they say, if you hold on too tightly, you might lose it. For the last 4 years, I was so scared of losing Jerry that I didn't give him room to breathe. I wanted to keep any other woman away, and I never wanted Jerry to find out about my past or what happened with Dean. But now, I might lose him anyway. And it won't be because Lacey is better than me or because another woman took him. I let my jealousy and foolishness push me into making bad choices. So if I lose Jerry, it's my own fault. I know he'll be back. He has to come back, even if it's just for his things. And when he does, I want to be different. He can be friends with whoever he wants, even Lacey, if he wants. I just want him back. This situation reminds me of something my grandpa told me when I was little. He said being jealous doesn't show love. It just shows you're unsure whether that person loves you. I wonder why it took Dean's mom to make me see that Jerry always loved me. I picked up my phone and made up my mind. I had told Dean and his mom that I would give Jerry space. I wouldn't call him, but I never promised I wouldn't email him. I wrote him a long message to tell him how much I loved him and wanted him back. I apologized for my jealousy and told him that I was sorry for my silly actions. I promised to get help for my issues. I sent the message, but I realized I never told him that nothing happened between Dean and me. Dean, just thinking about Miranda, drove me crazy. It was silly that I had wanted one woman for 4 years. It was even sillier that Jerry was the one with her. This whole thing made no sense. I didn't want to control Miranda. I just wanted to be with her a few times. Then she could just leave like all the others. I wouldn't need any of them if Lacey was better in bed. I wanted sex, good sex, at least a couple of times a week. And even though I cared about Lacey, yes, I said it, I love Lacey. I always have. But being with her feels wrong, like hurting a little animal. There's no fun in it. And I always feel guilty afterward. I tried hard not to cheat on her. I kept saying I would stop. But then there would be a waitress or a secretary just bending over right in front of me, almost asking for it. I always thought Lacey would never find out, but somehow she does. She doesn't even look for it. Things just happen. It's partly because we live in a small town. Maybe deep down I wanted to be caught. What's strange is that the 4 of us don't really fit together. Miranda is very attractive. She has the best figure I've ever seen. Her long legs look like they belong in a museum. Her body is amazing, with curves that are incredible. Just thinking about it makes me crazy. But the worst part is how she acts with Jerry. She hangs on him as if she can't help it. Last year, when we were all at the lake watching fireworks, I swear she was with him while we were all looking at the sky. It was hot in July. There was no way she was cold. She wrapped a blanket around them, and I am sure she made noise during the fireworks. Miranda should be mine. She and I belong together. Lacey should be with someone like Jerry. They match well. They are both easygoing and, I guess, kind. I have worked hard most of my life to keep those 2 apart. I'm pretty sure one date was all it would take for them to connect. Jerry is exactly what Lacey says she wants. Anyone can see that he has liked Lacey for a long time. I did what I had to keep them away from each other. But now I realize that keeping them apart may have been a big mistake. My mom pointed out that Jerry was one of the few guys I could trust with Lacey. That alone should have made him a good friend. But he was also one of the few men who could keep up with me, and we've both pushed each other to be better. Having Jerry as a friend could improve my marriage and my life in many ways. Jerry would be someone for Lacey to spend time with. He would also have my back when I needed a good excuse for things Lacey didn't need to know. Professionally, it was a great idea. Jerry is an engineer. He makes and fixes car parts, and I sell cars. We would make a great team. But the best part is that it would bring me closer to Miranda. Right now, she doesn't trust me at all. But if Jerry and I became friends, we'd be around each other more. Then I could use that chance to get closer to her. And since we'd all be friends, Lacey would never find out. Lacey never knew. My whole life, I've been the good girl. I always wanted love. For the first time, I understand pure desire. I'm not sure about my feelings for Jerry. I know he is a good man, a very good man. But most of us have a way of protecting our hearts. That protection keeps us from getting too attached to a crush. As much as I thought Jerry would be better than Dean, I felt he was out of reach. Every time I looked into his eyes, I could sense that everything I heard about him liking me was true. At the same time, I could see that he loved Miranda in a way that went beyond a simple crush. We spent an entire day together, and my body felt things I had never felt before. We wandered around, and we got along like we were old friends. As the day ended, we came back to the cabin, but first Jerry stopped at a store. He didn't let me see what he bought. He just said he wanted to surprise me. That's another thing I liked about him. He tried hard to make me happy, even though he was going through a tough time, too. His pain was probably worse than mine, since it was his first time dealing with this. Plus, deep down, he still cared about Miranda and his marriage, while Dean and I didn't mean much to me anymore. So I should have been the one planning surprises for Jerry. But when we got back, he sent me to my room to get comfortable while he worked on his surprise. I had just changed out of my wet underwear and put on comfy sweatpants and a t-shirt after a nice shower. My hair was still damp when I walked into the hallway with a brush. Suddenly, I smelled smoke. It was strong. I hurried downstairs to see what was happening. I thought maybe Jerry was planning a surprise campfire by the lake. That would be so cool. I hadn't done anything like that before. As I entered the cabin's kitchen, the smoke smell got thicker, but there was no smoke inside. I noticed that Jerry had covered the small table with a nice cloth and set 2 places. There were candles and a small bunch of wildflowers on the table. A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. If the day hadn't already made me realize I had been with the wrong man, that pretty table did. I heard a noise outside the back door. Without thinking, I rushed out and found Jerry using the longest tongs I had ever seen on a big grill. Watching him was nice. He was so focused on the fire and what he was cooking that he didn't see me until I was almost beside him. He turned and noticed my tears. "Lacey, why are you—" he started to say. He pulled me into a warm hug that I really needed. I felt safe and cared for in his arms. I enjoyed the moment too much to correct him. Jerry had seen my tears and, like many men, misunderstood why I was upset. My tears were from happiness because of his effort to cheer me up. But Jerry thought tears meant I was sad, so he hugged me to comfort me, and I let him. I felt closer to him. As I leaned against him, he didn't pull away. I soaked in the warmth. After just a moment in his arms, I forgot about my shower. I wasn't wearing anything under my sweatpants, but I didn't care. "I wish I could make you feel better," he said. I held him tighter and rested my head on his shoulder. I was feeling so good that I almost couldn't stand. If I had been wearing underwear, I might have ruined them. "Oh, no," he suddenly said, jumping back to the grill. He used the tongs to flip a giant piece of meat that looked silly like something from a cartoon. "Oh, it's fine," I said. "I love steak cooked well and a bit crispy." "Great. That one's for you," he smiled. "Mine?" I asked, surprised. I looked at the grill. The heavy metal grates were full of food. The meat smelled amazing, and I suddenly felt very hungry. "That huge piece can't be just for me." "Have you ever seen a cowboy steak?" he asked. I didn't want to tell him that Dean and I couldn't buy things like that. We managed to pay our bills most of the time on time, but I didn't know there were different types of steak. I looked past him at the big grill and saw 2 smaller packages wrapped in aluminum foil on the sides. They looked like they were cooking at a lower heat. He sprinkled some water on the fire to calm it down a bit and turned to me. "I know this is tough," he said, "but every day we'll get stronger. I know you miss him, but you can't let him treat you this way. You matter, Lace. You're special. Maybe being away for a few days will make him see what he could lose. All I have to do is say the word and he'll lose me for good," I thought. I only nodded, trying hard to keep a sad look on my face, hoping he would hug me again. A little later, we sat across from each other at the small table. The room was lit only by the candles. It felt romantic. The smaller packages turned out to be seasoned vegetables. Jerry had grilled them, too. The whole meal was delicious. The way he looked at me showed he wanted me to have a great time. He kept pouring me a yummy white wine. "I know red wine goes with meat," he said, "but I remember that I only like white wine." I smiled, surprised he remembered. It was something I had said back in college. Jerry seemed to know me better than Dean did, and he remembered those little things. The steak was so juicy and tender that I couldn't finish it all. Jerry couldn't either. After our meal, we cleaned up and saved the rest of the steak for breakfast. Then we took a walk by the lake. As we walked hand in hand, I felt like there was nowhere else I wanted to be. After our walk, Jerry hugged me again and told me things would be better tomorrow. I was so ready for him to make a move that I almost lost my cool. When he said goodnight, I decided to make a move. I waited for Jerry to take a shower in the small cabin, giving him a little time to settle into his room. Then I showered too, and quietly went into his room. I climbed into bed with him before he noticed. I gave him a moment to understand what was happening. "Jerry, I'm feeling really sad," I said, sniffling. "Can you hold me?" He rolled over toward me, his arms wrapped around me, and I felt a warm chill run down my back. He had no idea how much that hug meant to me. The way he held me showed he cared. He didn't grab me roughly or anything like that. He pulled me close and held me gently. I felt like I was floating. Without thinking, I moved my body against him. I thought he might notice. He shifted away and said, "Lacey, you're not wearing anything." "What does that matter? I just need comfort," I replied. "Well, it's not you, Lacey. It's me. Being this close when you're like this is making me, react." I had to give him credit. Even then, he was trying to be a gentleman. I moved closer to him. "Jerry, it's okay to feel that way," I said, pretending I didn't know what was going on. But really, that was exactly what I wanted. I pulled his arms back around me, placing his hands where I wanted them. As soon as he realized, he tried to pull them away. "Jerry, it's fine," I cooed. "Really, I want this. Don't you? Isn't this what you've wanted?" "Not really," he said. I turned to look at him. He was completely serious. "So you're just like Dean," I said sharply. "Maybe it's not you two. Maybe it's just me. My husband would rather be with other women. Any women, old, heavy, or not good-looking, as long as they are not me. I guess I'm just not attractive enough." "That's not true," he replied. "Every guy I know would want to be with you." "Just not you, right?" I challenged. "Me too," he said. "Then what's the problem?" I asked. "I think I've always seen you as more than just a body," he explained. "You are really special. If something were to happen between us, I'd want to take my time. I'd want something lasting. Having you and then losing you would be too much for me. I care about your mind, heart, and soul more than just your body." "Jerry, that's exactly what I've always wanted to hear," I told him. "Dean has never said anything like that. I wish I could give you a future, but we don't know what tomorrow will bring. I would leave Dean for you in a second, but you can't say the same. Miranda cares for you deeply. This is probably her only time cheating on you, and Dean likely tricked her. She loves you, Jerry, and you love her. I know she hurt you and it was bad, so you deserve some revenge, and I do too against Dean. Can't we just take a few days to forget everything back there?" "We had a great day today," he said. "It was perfect." He started to move his hands away from me. I realized that mentioning Miranda was a mistake. "Don't you dare move your hands," I said firmly. "Leave them where they are. I wanted them there." He looked surprised by my tone. His hands stiffened. "Okay," I continued. "Keep them there. I worked hard to get them there." "But we're upset with them for cheating," he replied. "We'd be no better than they are. They are the people we love, but they are also not good for us. It would take a lot for us to be like them," I explained. "And why do we need to be better? If neither of us was married and we just spent the weekend together like this, would we? Just forget it. Jerry, I'm lying here beside you happier than I've been in a long time. I want you. I'm not just doing this to get back at Dean. I've been cheated on by him so much that I barely feel it anymore. To be honest, I'm learning what my life could have been like with you, and I like what I see." Before I could finish, his hands gently squeezed me. A jolt of surprise ran through me. One hand stayed on me while the other rubbed my sides. He softly kissed my cheek, making my heart race. I wasn't sure what he was doing. I expected him to be rough, like Dean, but I was already feeling excited, and that was new for me. Jerry kissed my neck, and I felt amazing. When he saw how much I liked it, he kept going. He returned to my body, using his lips and tongue. I felt a rush of pleasure. I pulled him closer, wanting more from him. This was different from anything I had experienced. Jerry kept kissing and touching me with so much care. It felt good, and he even kissed my lips sometimes. "I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that. I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that." My only thought was about making him happy. His eyes flew open and his toes curled. "Lace, don't you want to eat breakfast first?" he asked. "We can eat after this," I replied. "Then we can do it again." "I'm not sure I can," he said. "You tired me out. I feel like a bus hit me." "Oh, you can," I teased. "Part of you is ready." My second time doing this, after the first time just a few hours ago, worked well. He was getting ready again, not as strong as before, but still good enough. I got on top of him and took what I wanted. I couldn't believe that just 12 hours ago, I thought sex was something a woman did when she had no other choice. I leaned over him. My long blonde hair hung around us like a curtain. I wanted to see something, so I pressed my mouth against his, and he kissed me back. He didn't care about my morning breath or anything else. Our tongues danced as my hips began to move faster. I was not just lying there. I was taking charge, and then everything changed. He gently pushed me over and started kissing me again before he entered me. It was very sore, but I didn't mind. Our bodies moved together, and we felt connected once more. When he finished, he yelled into my mouth, and it felt strange, almost like I wasn't really there. My body reacted, but something inside me fluttered. It was one of the most special moments of my life. "That's all, folks," he laughed. "You have worn me out." I laughed too, and he kissed me. I pulled the blankets around us, and we quickly fell asleep. Hours later, we woke up to my phone ringing. I figured it was Dean and chose to ignore it. Jerry handed me the phone. He saw whose name was on the screen and realized it wasn't Dean. It was Dean's mother. We both liked her, so I decided to pick it up. Miranda, I waited, hardly breathing, as Mary called Lacey's number. We had agreed that Mary would call Lacey because she was Lacey's mother-in-law. The plan was simple. Mary would call Lacey casually to check on her. Dean and I would listen in. Mary would start by asking how Lacey was feeling. If that went well, she would try to gather as much information as possible. Dean and I wanted to know where she was and if she was still with Jerry. If Lacey seemed calm, Mary would ask when she planned to come home. "Hi, Mary," Lacey answered. Her voice sounded scratchy and odd. "Hi, Lacey," Mary said. "How are you?" "Honestly, I feel awful," Lacey replied. "I can't seem to get out of bed and don't see why I should—" "You went back to bed after breakfast?" Mary asked. "I didn't eat breakfast," Lacey said. Mary shot her son a disapproving look. "Sweetheart, I know you're feeling down, but you need to eat and take care of yourself," said Mary. "I thought Jerry would help you stay on your feet. I always thought he was the sensible one." Lacey said. "He's worse off than I am. I'm trying to lift him up. He's heartbroken and weak. He feels completely drained." Hearing that made me feel faint. I needed to hear Jerry's voice. "Have her put him on the phone," I whispered to Mary, who glared at me. I didn't care about the plan. I just needed to know Jerry was okay. "Lacey, can you give Jerry the phone?" Mary asked. "Maybe I can help him feel better." "Mary, our rooms aren't on the same floor," Lacey said. "If we talk later, I can have him call you." "Okay, dear, you do that," Mary said. "Lacey, please go eat something. You need food for your strength. Get Jerry to eat too. Do you feel ready to talk to Dean yet?" "Why, Mary, what's the point? He's never going to change. Maybe we shouldn't have gotten married at all." "Lacey, Dean and I have talked a lot," Mary said. "He feels really sorry. He's a different man now. He understands what he stands to lose. He wants you both to go to counseling, and he's going to join as well. He wants to figure out why he behaves this way. He knows things are different now. The fact that you left him made him realize how much he loves you. Things are not as bad as you think. You don't have all the details. Just think about it." Lacey didn't respond. I could tell it would take time to show her that this time was really different. "Lacey, please ask Dean to call Miranda too," said Mary. "She's really worried." As Mary hung up, Dean and I began to talk. "Well, I guess we got some answers," I said. "You can relax, Dean. They aren't together. They aren't even in the same room." "How is that supposed to make me feel better?" Dean asked. "Jerry is too busy being sad about you to protect her. She could be with anyone while he's in a different room crying." "I don't care who your wife is with," I told him. "You deserve whatever happens. I just want my husband back. I'm going home to wait for him to call." "You two are awful," Mary said. "Lacey is too small not to eat, Dean. She's lying in bed and crying all the time. Did you hear how strained her voice was? Jerry doesn't sound much better either. I think they're both so embarrassed by what you two did that they can't even look at each other. That's probably why they don't even have rooms on the same floor. I really hope this was worth it." You've both hurt two of the nicest people I know. As I walked out of the diner and toward my car, I heard someone call my name. I turned to see a guy from the kitchen at Porky's. "Hey, Miranda," he said, looking around to make sure no one could hear us. "How are things with Jerry?" he asked. "Not good," I replied. "I suddenly realized a lot of people knew about our problems. I guess everyone heard about you and Dean in Porky's office, huh?" he said. I just nodded. "So I guess you don't want things to get worse, right?" he added. "How could they get worse?" I asked. "Well," he said, "as angry as he is now, just think about how he would feel if he knew about the other time you and Dean were together." "What are you talking about?" I began. "Look, Miranda," he said, "I don't want to make things worse for you. And Jerry is a good guy, but I have liked you since the first time I saw you. I know it might sound bad, but this could be my only chance." "What do you want?" I asked, confused. "I want you and me to be together just once," he said. "I promise I won't bother you again after that." "Why would I trust a guy who is threatening me?" I replied. "Just think about it," he said. "I'll be in touch." I got into my car, not even knowing that someone else had seen everything. Jerry and I looked at Lacey in surprise after she hung up the phone. "Lacey, you lied," I said. "Of course I did, honey," she smiled. "What did you expect?" "She called you because she was worried," I said. "Nope. She called to make sure my husband and your wife knew how we are doing. I bet they were right there with her, or she's going to tell them everything we just talked about," she told me. "They need to worry about us, but they don't deserve to know the truth. Besides, I didn't tell one lie." "What about what you said about our rooms being on different floors?" I asked. "They are," she smiled. "Your room has hardwood floors and mine has carpet." "But she thinks we're sad and weak," I said. "I told her I hadn't eaten yet," she replied. "If she thinks that means I'm not eating at all, that's on her. I also said I hadn't gotten out of bed. That's true, too. I just didn't tell her it was because you've been with me. Do you want me to call her back and say that?" "I guess not," I said. "Good," she smiled. "Let's go make breakfast. Or are you not done yet?" I looked at the floor, feeling shy. "Lacey, I'm sorry. I just got carried away." "Jerry, why are you apologizing?" She smiled. "I loved every moment. Last night was the best night of my life. No matter what happens, I won't regret it. I'm hoping for more, but I need a little time to recover." Neither of us felt like cooking, so we went into town for breakfast. In the quiet diner, I couldn't stop smiling. For some reason, I kept finding little ways to touch Jerry. I pushed his hair back. I fixed his collar. I had to hold myself back from holding his hand. Soon, I moved my chair right next to him instead of sitting across. Some of it was on purpose, but a lot was just natural. I didn't realize it until the waitress pointed it out. "Good morning, folks," she smiled. "Are you two newlyweds?" "What makes you think that?" Jerry asked. I tapped him on the shoulder. "How could you tell?" I added. "Anyone can see it," she smirked. "You have that just-got-out-of-bed look. You look exhausted, but you can't keep your hands off each other. Those wedding rings show you're married. Most couples who have been together a while can't stand each other." We ordered breakfast, and she walked away to get our food. Jerry seemed lost in thought. I had a few things on my mind, too. "What she said isn't always true, right?" I told him. "It isn't true about you and Miranda. In the 2 days we've been away from home, I've just thought how great it would be to have someone love me like you love her. I also figured out why she feels that way." "Lacey, Miranda isn't evil," he said. "I know that now," I replied. "She just seems scared someone will take you from her. But with a body and face like hers, I don't see why she should be worried. I really don't think anyone could come between you two." "You could," he said. My heart raced. The contest was over. Jerry might have liked me for a long time, but at that moment I realized I might love him. I would do anything for him, even if it meant sending him back to the woman he married. "Jerry, I would never try to come between you and Miranda," I said, feeling awful saying it. "So, what does that mean for us?" he asked, looking confused. I could see he was ready to fight for our feelings. I wanted to cry so much, but I couldn't do that to him. Unlike my rude husband, Jerry was ready to risk everything for our new connection. If our lives were a movie, I might have jumped into his Mustang and driven away with him, leaving everything behind. We could have started fresh somewhere else. But we both had spouses and families who depended on us. We couldn't just leave. It leaves us as very good friends, I said softly. And we won't let anyone stop us from being that. We will always remember this weekend as something special, but we have to go back to our lives. That's nonsense, he said, clearly upset. He took a deep breath to calm down. We need to go for a walk by the lake, he said. I signaled to the waitress, who brought us the check. Jerry paid, leaving a generous tip that made her smile and say she hoped we would come back soon. Jerry seemed like he might cry, but I felt like smiling. Jerry was fighting for us in a way my husband never had. It made me feel good about myself and lifted my spirits. By the time we reached the lake, Jerry was calmer. Lacey, you told me that Dean kept you from hanging out with other people during school and college. How do you think he will react to us being friends? He asked. Things are different now, I replied. Jerry, you don't know what these few days have done for me. I won't ever let him or anyone else control my life again. But you will have a tough time. Miranda won't let anyone near you. She probably already wants to confront me. That's going to change, he said firmly. If she hopes to get back in my good books or keep me with her, she needs to change her ways. As long as they don't know what really happened between us, we have the advantage. But we need to talk about what comes next. Ooh, we have things to discuss? I asked, curious. We need to decide what to tell them about our time together, he said. That's simple, I replied. They think we spent most of our time being sad about them. We were on different floors in the same hotel, that's all. But isn't that misleading? He asked. No, it's just keeping things quiet, I said. That's a minor issue. What they did was far worse. Didn't she say she would never cheat on you? He nodded. So she lied to you, I continued. She cheated and lied. She doesn't deserve to know everything. They think we were on different floors. Let's just let them think that. I'll handle the talking. How will you do that? He asked. It'll be easy, I chuckled. Men don't pick up on hints. You think very straight. I won't even have to lie. When Dean asks if we were together, I'll say, Jerry and I are not the kind of people to cheat, you know. That leaves it vague. So you'll tell him a lie? He asked. A marriage built on lies isn't strong. Jerry, what I said isn't a lie, I laughed. I didn't say yes or no. He will probably take it to mean no, but that's on him. Most marriages have some lies. If a wife asks her husband if a dress makes her look big and he loves her, he might not say the truth. If he did, he'd have a problem at home. He shook his head. Jerry, I know you care about me, but don't you still love Miranda? Do you plan to stay with her? I asked. I guess, he said. After this weekend, we are even. But if she ever does something like this again, I won't hesitate to leave her. So will you tell her the whole truth? I asked. Will you walk in and say, Miranda, I spent 2 nights with Lacey and we had a great time? Really? Okay, I see what you're saying, he admitted. Telling the truth would hurt both her and our marriage more than staying quiet would. It's better to keep quiet this time. But that doesn't make it true. Which parts aren't true? I asked playfully. Did we not share special moments? I tapped my back. Well, yeah, he said, looking shy. You were the first person I shared that with, I said. It was something special. So didn't we share more than just a hug? Yes, he replied, again not meeting my eyes. I loved every moment of it, I said. I thought of you in ways I hadn't before. I remember wanting to be close to you. I've never done that before, but I wanted it for you. I know Miranda may be different, but we shared something real. It was very good, he said quietly. I noticed how his legs were rubbing together. I'm sure you remember us being together a few times, I teased. Of course, he replied. So which part did you make up? I asked. We didn't have 2 nights and an afternoon. We only had 1 amazing night, and you forgot about the morning, he said. You're right, sweetheart, I said. I completely forgot about the morning, but you forgot about this afternoon when we get back to the cabin. We will have our afternoon. Then we can take a nap in each other's arms. After that, you'll have me for the whole night again. That's how it happened. We spent the afternoon together, and it was wonderful. We took a nap, wrapped up in each other's arms. I had 2 secrets I wanted to share with him, but I decided to wait for another time. When we woke up, we showered together. It was a new experience for us. And then things changed. Jerry drove us far away from the small town to a bigger city. We had dinner at a very nice restaurant. It was probably the fanciest place I had ever been to. I appreciated what he did, but I didn't say that I preferred our dinner at the little table with the steaks we grilled. That felt more romantic. When we got back to the cabin, I expected Jerry to take my clothes off and be with me. But it was different. He took off my clothes slowly, kissing every part of my body as it was revealed. He adored my body. I thought it would be fast and rough, but it was so gentle that I almost cried. We kissed and touched each other the whole time. It took a long while for us to reach that sweet moment, but I was excited all the time. When he finally let me feel that release, it was like a wave of joy washed over us. We were both tired again. I wanted to enjoy my last night in Jerry's arms. But just as I was settling down to sleep, he interrupted my thoughts. "I love you, Lacey," he said. I was so shocked that I couldn't respond. Did he really mean it? I lay awake all night considering his words. It felt like everything changed. I decided that when morning came, I would tell him the same thing. After all, my feelings for him were among the secrets I wanted to share. But as I thought about it, I wondered if I had the right to. Everyone in town knew how Jerry felt about me, but my feelings had grown over just one weekend. Even though I was sure they were real, I had no way to prove it or explain it. The next morning, I touched Jerry. "No, Lacey," he said. "Is my offer that bad?" I asked. He shook his head and then kissed me. His tongue found mine, and he held me so tightly that it was hard to breathe. I could feel how much he cared for me. "This is hard enough," he said. "If we are together again, I might not be able to let go." I nodded, pretending to understand. But I really thought, then let's spend forever together, even though I didn't say it out loud. Dean. She was coming back home. They were driving so we could talk. She called me that morning right after they started their drive. It was a 4-hour trip, so even with a lunch break, they would be back by mid-afternoon. But something felt different with her. She didn't ask me what I wanted. She didn't cry or plead to discuss things. She simply told me we were going to talk. And when she said all of us, I knew that meant Jerry and Miranda would be there too. I was a bit angry because I thought if we were alone, I could handle the situation better. Maybe she was getting strength from Jerry. Perhaps they were sharing their troubles. On the other hand, I was relieved to have some company or support because she sounded very upset. It felt like she was done with me. It seemed this was the last straw for her, and she wanted to talk before ending our relationship. No matter what happened, I couldn't let her divorce me. Losing Lacey would be the most embarrassing thing. All those people who said I wasn't good enough for her would just laugh at me. I would become a joke in our town. It would be worse if another guy ended up with her. The only way I could save myself a bit would be if she ended up with Jerry. Jerry was popular like me. If he was with Lacey and I had Miranda, I could make it look like I wanted it that way. I could tell everyone in town that their opinion about Lacey was wrong. I could explain that they were fooled by her beauty and kindness. They had no idea how boring she was or how little fun she was in our private times. I could tell them how when we were on our honeymoon, she didn't know how to do anything. And when I finally convinced her, she just lay there stiff as a board. Maybe some would understand why I cheated on her. Getting with Miranda, who was almost as pretty and a lot more fun, would keep me on top. But since I couldn't count on getting Miranda unless Jerry left her, keeping Lacey was my safest choice. Speaking of Miranda, I was sure I could help her with her problem. That would help me gain her friendship and Jerry's support. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that becoming friends with Jerry was the best way forward. If I gave Lacey something to do, she would have less time to follow me around and check on me. As my mom always said, Jerry was too good of a person to try anything with Lacey. Plus, Miranda watched him closely. It would be perfect for everyone. Miranda and I nervously waited at our usual table. It felt right to meet at Porky's. Dean had even agreed to meet when the restaurant was quiet. Now, we just had to wait for them to arrive. The door opened, and I turned, hoping to see Jerry. Instead, it was just Dean, and he was grinning like a Cheshire cat. "We're going to fix everything tonight," he said. I stayed silent. "I know about the blackmail," he continued. My eyes widened in surprise. "Let me guess," I whispered angrily. "You want to trick your way into joining him, right?" "What makes you think that?" he asked. "Because I understand guys like you," I replied. All you care about is yourself and what you can gain. Jerry is worth 1,000 guys like you. Jerry has always lived in my shadow, he said. He's always been second best. The girl he idolized. I was with her and married her. He got you as a backup because even God was tired of seeing him lose. And you, always acting like you're better than me. I just wanted to help you out. I thought we could all be friends again. You think every guy wants you. Well, I did too, but this time I really wanted to help you. I looked at him and then laughed. I laughed loud and long. What's so funny? He asked. I've done a lot of bad things in my life, I said. Before I moved here to start anew, I got pregnant by a married man. I thought it was the worst time of my life, but it turned out to be the best. I came here, dated some nice guys and one jerk. Then I met the man of my dreams. He loves me for who I am and makes me feel amazing. He has just one flaw, you. He thinks he's not good enough compared to you. I don't get why. He's actually better looking than you, at least to me. I would do anything for him. Okay, I get all that, but what's so funny? He asked. Do you know what they're blackmailing me with? I asked him. I have no idea, he replied. Remember when we first got together? I asked. Oh, that, he said. Just tell him about it. I can't, I said. I might lose him. It's that or cheat on him, he said. But don't worry, I've got this covered. He looked over to where a man was setting up a laptop and other gear. You ready, Bob? He yelled. The man gave him a thumbs up. Before I could ask what was happening, they walked in. Lacey looked very angry. She seemed ready to confront Dean fiercely. Jerry, on the other hand, looked heartbroken. He felt like he had lost his best friend, but he could never lose me no matter what. Still, he thought he had. I stood up to go to him, but the pain on his face made me stop. If anyone had ever hurt Jerry like that, I would have been furious. The fact that I was the cause was heartbreaking. Tonight could either bring Jerry and me back together or end everything. We sat down at a larger table that could seat 8. It fit since Jerry and I were upset with each other, so it hurt, but we sat across from each other like enemies. It was the same with Lacey and Dean. I didn't want to sit too close to Dean, worried that Jerry might think there was something between us. I'll start, said Lacey. She was usually not this assertive, so we listened closely. Dean, this is it, she said. I want a divorce. I can't be with a man who keeps cheating on me. I've given you too many chances, and you haven't changed. Anyone who cheats this much doesn't love me, so there's no point in staying married. Remember less than 2 weeks ago? That night I got angry and danced on stage? I told you then that if you cheated again, we were done. So you get a lawyer, and I will too. She paused and looked at him. Do you think this is funny? She asked. He just nodded. Lacey, I love you, he said. These 3 days apart made me think. Being without you made me realize I need to change. There are going to be changes in our relationship and in me. It's too late, she said, a bit uncertain. Again, he shook his head. Why not? She asked. You could see his words were reaching her. They had been together for so long. A long relationship builds connections, and something inside her wanted to hear him out. Dean pointed to the man at the other booth. The man came to our table. Dean, you don't need this guy, said Porky. I recognize his gear. He's a lie detector tester, right? Dean nodded. Why don't the 4 of you come into my office? Porky suggested. Once we were all settled in his office, still confused, he pointed a remote at a big TV across his desk. Everything in my office is usually recorded, he said. This will be better proof than a lie detector. The TV turned on, and we watched a scene from the bar unfold first. Dean was pacing angrily, staring at the door. That was Dean 3 nights ago, Porky said. He was really mad that you weren't there. He was so upset that he ignored my waitresses. If you look across the room, you'll see Miranda. She's always alone, which is strange for such a beautiful woman. But watch this. One of her husband's bandmates walks over to her. You can't hear much because of the loud music and people drinking, but he tells her he saw Jerry stuck in traffic and that Jerry picked up Lacey. I think that's what started all this mess, right? Dean and I nodded. Dean got really angry, Porky went on, and so did Miranda. But I don't get it. Dean, Jerry did a good thing. Did you really want him to leave your wife waiting on the road? And you too, Miranda. Lacey has tried hard to be your friend. She always stands up for you when some stuck-up people talk bad about you. You should know you can trust Jerry. He cares about you a lot. I nodded. I know he does, I said, and I love him just as much, but I get so jealous of Lacey. She's really pretty, and Jerry liked her for a long time. But he grew up and chose you, Porky said. He's never looked back. Anyway, moving on, Porky continued. Now we see Dean yelling and making a fool of himself. I didn't even tell my security to kick him out because if you look at the crowd, nobody is paying him any attention. They've seen it all before. No one cares. Except for you, Miranda. This is when you sit down and come up with your crazy plan to get back at Jerry and Lacey. If you keep watching the video, you'll see Miranda suddenly jump up and slap Dean hard. That was probably when he suggested that the two of you get back at them in a way to make them jealous. Then Dean calms her down. Look at the anger in her eyes. Jerry, do you really think a woman that angry would cheat on you willingly? The screen goes blank, and Porky skips to the next part. It shows Dean and me sitting together in his office. At first, we don't say much, then we start playing cards. Suddenly, Dean jumps up and yells, "They're here!" He opens his shirt and zips up his pants fast. Lacey walks in, and I see her yelling at Dean and hitting him a couple of times. Next, I see Jerry's face the moment he sees me behind Dean. His expression changes in seconds. It's like a sunny day that suddenly turns stormy. In no time, he's in front of Dean, then he's on top of Dean, hitting him hard. I see myself in the video completely confused. I keep asking myself, what just happened? Then Jerry is gone. A few moments later, Dean's mom walks in and explains everything. After she finishes, I just felt empty and foolish. The video stopped there. Jerry, I'm so sorry, I said quickly. I shouldn't have listened to him. I didn't want to lose you. I never want to spend another day without you. I was just foolish and jealous, but I didn't cheat. I would never do that. It was all Dean's silly plan and it failed. Can you forgive me? He nodded and opened his arms. Relief washed over his face, and I felt happier than ever. I ran into his arms, hoping he could move past this. I looked at Lacey, and she nodded her head. But she didn't look as happy as Jerry and I did. So, Lace, are we okay? Dean asked with a smile. Let's just say we're not exactly warm and fuzzy, she replied. I'm holding off the divorce for now. You didn't really cheat, but it was only because Miranda wasn't willing to. Since you didn't cheat, I have to give you another chance, but I'm sure you'll mess it up. What about you, Lacey? Dean asked angrily. You and Dean were in a hotel together for 3 days. You both were mad at us for thinking we did something bad. What exactly are you saying, Dean? Lacey snapped back. Come on, Lace, Dean said. We're all grown-ups here. Emotions have been high. Jerry has always liked you. I just want to know, did you and Jerry? Before he could finish, Lacey slapped him hard, leaving a mark on his face. Forget you, Dean, she said angrily. When you cheated with Connie and I found out from her coworkers, I didn't go and cheat on you. I forgave you. When you worried about getting Heather Springer pregnant and her dad wanted to come after you, I forgave you again, and I never once. She paused and wiped away a tear. Jerry was a complete gentleman, she said. We had separate rooms. We weren't even on the same floor. Neither of us would cheat. Lace, I'm sorry, Dean said quietly. I love you. I just had to know. I'm sure Miranda wanted to know too, right? He looked at me for support, but I just turned my head. Still, I was glad that Jerry hadn't cheated with Lacey. I would have let it go if he had, but knowing he hadn't made things worse for me. If he had been with Lacey, I would have said it was fine right away because of what he was about to learn, but I would never have let him out of my sight again. Jerry, I want to say sorry to you for... Dean started. You have nothing to be sorry for, Jerry replied. Nothing happened. Jerry, since we were kids, you and I have been competing, Dean said, and most of the time, okay, almost all of it, I cheated. You always played fair and were nice about everything. A lot of people say we've grown up. I'd like us to be friends, I really mean it. I was surprised. But Jerry did what anyone who knew him would expect. He shook Dean's hand and said he'd like that too. Miranda, Lacey said. You don't need to say anything, Lacey, I told her. I think I need a friend too, so if you want to be my friend. In her usual way, Lacey came around the table and hugged me. She really was a good person. Lacey, maybe we should wait until you hear the next part, I said. You might be upset with me, but I promise I didn't know back then. You don't want to be my friend? she asked, looking hurt. Of course I do, I said. But you might not want to be my friend in a few minutes. I'm just trying to protect you, okay? She looked confused. Jerry, we have a problem, I told him. I'm being blackmailed. By who? He asked, sounding angry. I haven't done anything yet, I said, and I don't plan to. I'm going to tell you everything, just listen. It covers a lot of things. You know most of it, but Lacey doesn't, and some of it explains things. Okay, said both Jerry and Lacey. Wait a minute, said Dean. Hey, can we get some beers over here? Help yourself, yelled Porky. Dean went to the bar and stepped behind it. Jerry turned to Lacey and me. What can I get for you, ladies? He asked. You know what I want, I told him. Get one for Lacey, too. She smiled, looking unsure. You're gonna love it, I said. Dean came back with a bottle of whiskey and a plate of snacks. Soon after, Jerry joined us with a full tray. Dean started laughing. What's so funny? Lacey asked. Look at Jerry carrying that tray, he said. Thanks to him, I got one last story to tell. Huh? Said Lacey and I. We didn't get it. Every time I came here, I made friends with one of the waitresses. He laughed. The three of us laughed along because it was funny. Just as I was about to tell my story, Lacey took a sip of her beer. Wow, this is good, she said. What is it? It's my favorite beer. It comes from a brewery in Wisconsin, I told her. It's called Not Your Father's Root Beer. Then I started my story. I grew up in a normal family in Ohio. I was the youngest of 3 kids and the second girl. Being the youngest meant I was mostly ignored. My older sister had long, pretty blonde hair, just like yours, Lacey. My older brother was a great athlete. I was just the awkward baby sister until I turned 11 and started to change. I grew early, and by 13, I had bigger boobs than my sisters, but my body still looked like a young boy's. It was strange because mentally and emotionally I was still a kid. I didn't understand why I couldn't jump into the pond in just a t-shirt and shorts anymore. I told my mom that I had done it just a week before and that I always did it. My brother got into several fights because his friends noticed my breasts moving under my wet t-shirt. Soon, a lot of boys and even some men were hanging around the pond, hoping I would come to play. At the same time, I had always been more of a tomboy, so I didn't have many friends among the girls. But suddenly, not only did I lose friends, but the girls who used to ignore me started to really dislike me. I hadn't done anything to make them hate me, but when they saw that the boys were interested in me and not in them, it was more than enough. It took another 3 years for me to grow again. Thankfully, I didn't get any taller. I was already this height by 15, praying not to grow more. My mom said I was lucky. She said tall girls were the ones who became famous models, but my sister reminded her that models didn't have big breasts. Even my own sister hated me for it. Then, when I turned 16, my skinny legs started to fill out. It felt like overnight my body changed. When I returned to school, the rumors began. Some said I was a stripper. Others said I was bodybuilding. Some of my brother's friends thought I was taking steroids, but in truth, I spent the summer learning to drive and just sitting around with my dad, who taught me how to drive safely. I had never been to a gym, and that was fine with me. I wasn't athletic at all. I can't do anything athletic. My breasts are too big to run. Even in a sports bra, it hurts and leaves stretch marks. My hips are so wide that my knees get hurt easily when I try to run. I tried dancing, but that didn't go well. Because of my body shape, any kind of movement seemed to catch attention in a way I didn't like. I also had other problems. Most boys my age were too scared to talk to me, and since I wasn't interested in dating boys, some girls thought I must not like them at all. I finally left all that behind when I graduated from high school. My grades were okay, but I never really tried hard. I signed up for a community college nearby. There, I quickly started making friends. A lot of my issues came from the tough times in high school. I struggled to talk to people, so I didn't know how to fit in. But just like before, there were a group of girls who wanted to make me look bad. I went out with a couple of guys, but things turned sour fast. I was so eager to have friends and be loved that I believed whatever they said. Soon, I earned a bad reputation, and this time it was true. My turning point came from my English teacher. He had a special way with words and always knew what to say. He told me I had a talent for writing that I should explore. Thankfully, he wanted to help me. We spent so much time together that I became less available to others. This helped quiet some of the nasty rumors those girls liked to spread. He seemed like everything I wanted. He was caring and made me feel important. But sadly, he was married with 3 kids and was not honest about it. I didn't find out until it was too late. I was already expecting his child. Even after I learned the truth about his marriage, he convinced me it was okay. He said his wife didn't support him and that he was getting a divorce. I believed him. He told me it wasn't the right time for us to have a baby because I was too young. He said I would be pulled into the divorce and look bad. Naturally, I took his word for it. I chose to have an abortion, thinking he felt as sad about it as I did. I believed him until I overheard him talking to a friend. He said I had the best body he'd ever seen and called me the most gullible girl he had met. He made it clear he had no plan to leave his family for me. He just wanted my body. When our relationship was revealed, he got a real divorce. His wife took everything he had. He lost his job, his money, and the chance to see his kids again. Sadly, my reputation got even worse. I felt like I had to leave town to save my sanity. My family sent me to a therapist to help me with my feelings. It took a bit more than 2 years for me to heal. When I moved in with my aunt, I felt ready to start fresh. I promised myself I would never let anyone take advantage of me again. I also decided not to let mean girls get to me. A few days after moving, I wasn't sure if I wanted to stay. I couldn't find a job related to my studies. My aunt encouraged me to explore the town, so I went out a couple of times. The first time, my aunt took me to the ice cream shop. I met many guys who seemed interested in me. The next day, I was still unpacking when I met Jerry. He was fixing my aunt's lawnmower. When I saw him, something about him drew me in. As he worked on the mower, I noticed his kind and honest face. I felt something for him. Even though he didn't know me, I felt a kind of love for him. I decided I wanted to win his heart. I knew I was pretty, and I thought I could get his attention. I'm a bit ashamed to admit that I didn't care if he was married or not. I went to a party with a guy named Rick, who said everyone would be there. I had no real interest in Rick. I just wanted to go to the party. Before anyone thinks bad of me, Rick was using me too. He took me to the party to show me off and make it seem like we were together. He also wanted to make another guy named Dean jealous. I didn't know Dean had just married someone named Lacey. I was focused only on Jerry and wanted to meet him badly. At the party, Dean tried to flirt with me. When I mentioned Jerry, he got angry. He told me I couldn't be looking for Jerry Lewis, but I was. Dean claimed he knew Jerry well and could tell me everything I needed to know about him. He insisted that I should get to know him better so he could help me win Jerry. We ended up in a motel room where he thought he would get something from me. I'm sorry, Lacey, I didn't know who you were or that you were Dean's wife. So he was cheating on me less than a day after our wedding? Lacey yelled. You both said you would just listen, I reminded her. Lacey took a breath, but she and Jerry still looked very angry. Jerry's fists were clenching and unclenching. I needed to finish my story before things got worse. Dean said he would tell me how to get close to Jerry if I gave him something in return. I joked and asked if a kiss would work. He said yes, so I told him to take off his clothes. After he was undressed, I asked him for some information about Jerry before we started. I also warned him that I would do something he had never experienced before. This made him excited, and I noticed his little body was reacting. And when I say little, Lacey, you know what I mean, right? Lacey looked puzzled. Isn't it a normal size? She asked. I've never seen another one. Lacey, we need to have a talk, I said. Anyway, Dean then told me I was wasting my time with Jerry because he was already in love with someone else. He said Jerry loved you, Lacey. He mentioned that Jerry might not be interested in anyone else and might even leave town for good since you just married Dean. He didn't say he was the one you married. Then he asked if I was ready to kiss him. I said no and turned to leave. He got angry. He ran out of the room, shouting at me. He yelled, "What are you doing? You promised!" I reminded him that I hadn't promised anything and pointed out he was standing naked in the street. He ran back inside the motel. I didn't realize many people had seen us. One of them is the person who is now trying to blackmail me. But you didn't do anything wrong, honey, Jerry said. You should have told me. Well, we brought in the lie detector guy to show you and Lacey that nothing happened, Dean said. We don't need that, Jerry replied. I trust Randa. At least I hope I can. He took my hand. Honey, why go through this? Just tell me. Jerry, you get nervous when Dean is involved, I said. You seem to think he always wins. I was afraid if I told you I went out with Dean, even if it was before we met, you'd leave me and let him have me back. I would do anything to keep you, so if living with a lie was what it took to stay happy together, I would do it. I love you. So it's over, Lacey said. That jerk has nothing against you, Miranda. Oh, no, it isn't, Jerry said angrily. No one will blackmail my wife and get away with it. But they don't have anything, I said. I've never cheated on you and never would have, which is why I told you. They can't hold anything over me. That's not good enough, Jerry said. You sound more like me every day, Dean grinned. I have a plan. Jerry, 2 hours after our big talk, I was full of energy. My feelings were all over the place, and there was so much happening. I loved Miranda more than ever. Finding out she had never cheated on me changed everything. Learning about her past made me love her even more. Some guys might be upset that she tried to win me over by any means, but I thought it was great. Men go after women all the time. We see someone we like, we ask them out, and hope they fall for us. Why can't women do the same? Men often chase women because of looks or desire. Miranda chased me because she believed I would love her the way she wanted to be loved, and that I would never hurt her. Isn't that why we all fall in love? Lacey was a big complication. I had loved her forever. When she married Dean, I thought I had lost her for good. I had come to terms with that. But spending a weekend with her changed everything. I realized I still loved Lacey just as much as before. During those 3 days, she impressed me beyond my imagination. I knew she loved me too. I could feel it in every look and breath she took. But I was confused about what was happening. Then there was Dean. I had disliked him for a long time, but now I needed him and his plan. I even liked the idea of us being friends. I have a lot of friends, but who couldn't use a few more? Plus, if we became friends, I could see Lacey again. No matter how much I love Miranda, I still need Lacey in my life. Finally, there was the blackmailer. I wanted to confront him. I hoped he caused trouble after we caught him. The plan was simple. Miranda called him and told him to meet her at Porky's to get his blackmail money. She said it would only happen this once. He laughed, which meant he expected this to continue. She would take him to the office at Porky's. We would record him trying to blackmail her. Before anything got out of hand, Dean and I were ready to catch the guy and hand him and the recording over to the police. I was hiding under Miranda's desk while Dean was tucked away in the closet. We waited quietly. I couldn't resist tickling Miranda's legs while we sat there. I kept moving my fingers up her legs. She opened her legs to let me go higher. Jerry, when we get home, I'm going to show you how much I missed. She stopped when a man knocked and came into the room. To our surprise, he wasn't alone. From under the desk, I could only see 3 pairs of legs. I couldn't tell how big or old the men were, and I just hoped Dean wouldn't back out. I was committed. There was no way I would let them take Miranda. Hold on, Miranda said. This was supposed to be just you and me. You never said anything about anyone else being here. I didn't agree to that. Deals change, sweetheart. That's how it goes, he replied. Besides, they're not just watching, they want to join in. That's not happening, Miranda said firmly. I've never been with more than one person at a time, and you can't force me into this. You will, the man said. If you don't, your marriage is over. I'll tell Jerry what I saw. That's wrong, Miranda shouted. You can't blackmail me. Cheating on your husband is wrong too, he shot back, especially when it's with the guy he hates the most. Miranda stood up. Her short skirt and tight top had all 3 men staring at her, so they didn't notice Dean moving behind them. So what's this about? Why did you move the chair? The man asked, grinning at his friends. See? I told you she'd go for it. You were wrong about a lot of things, Miranda said, a smile on her face. First, I never slept with Dean. Second, my Jerry and Dean don't hate each other. They've grown up and moved on. The 3 men looked at each other, realizing her act was over. She was no longer scared, but smiling like she was at a fun show. The third thing is that I'd never be with anyone as disgusting as you 3. Anyone who has to blackmail a woman to get her to sleep with them is pathetic. I'd rather lose my husband than be with you, she said. The men looked uneasy now. I was sure they sensed something was off. And the last thing you were wrong about is why I moved my chair, she said, still smiling. I wanted to see my husband take you down. As she said that, I stood up and charged at the 3 men. The second guy looked younger and in better shape than the others. I went for him first, and I felt I knew him from somewhere. He stumbled back as my fist hit him, but Dean was quick. He tripped him with his leg, sending him crashing to the ground. I jumped on him and punched him in the face 3 times. He was out of it. I turned to the guy who had been talking. Dean had thrown the 3rd guy into a wall. He didn't get back up. The last guy tried to run. I kicked him hard in the back just as he was getting up, and he fell forward. I jumped on him, pinning him down. "Please!" he cried. "I couldn't help it. She's just too attractive." "Think about that while you're in jail," I said. "What?" he whined. "We fought. We're even." Just then, Porky came in with several police officers. Each officer quickly grabbed a blackmailer. When they caught the younger guy, he looked shocked. "Officer Carroll, what a surprise," he said. Then I remembered where I had seen him before. He was the cop who had given me a speeding ticket while checking out Miranda. All 3 men ended up facing serious time in jail. The judge gave Officer Carroll the longest sentence of 10 years, and he deserved it. That night marked the start of a great friendship. We all became close. About a month later, we were back at Porky's, enjoying time together. Miranda and Lacey were drinking their favorite root beer-flavored beer. Dean and I talked about things we wanted to do one day. I laughed hard when Dean said he always wanted to jump into a crowd and be carried. It reminded him of football when he wished to throw the winning pass and be lifted by his teammates. As he shared the story, Porky tapped my shoulder and whispered that his band was late again, and I needed to play. I signaled to the band, and Lacey whispered for me to play Any Way You Want It. I smiled and nodded. I felt happy, but a little guilt nagged at me. I pushed it aside and focused on doing my best with the guitar. The crowd went wild from the start of our song. Almost as if it had been planned, Lacey pranced onto the stage halfway through, dancing along with the music. I had a feeling something big would happen when she told me which song to play. But what surprised me was when she pulled Miranda up on stage with her. The 2 of them danced with me and with each other, making the crowd go wild. I looked down at Dean, who shrugged and smiled. I waved him to join us on the stage. He rushed up the steps as the music played on. I glanced out at the crowd on the dance floor and leaned over the edge. Some people near the stage grabbed my legs, waist, and back to help me stay balanced while I kept playing. After a few moments, I was back on stage, singing the song's final part, with Miranda on one side and Lacey on the other. "Now's your chance, Dean," I shouted. He smiled and nodded. He moved to the edge of the stage and jumped out over the crowd. I had never seen anything like it. There were a lot of guys down there. Most of them seemed to dislike Dean. As he flew over, expecting people to catch him, they moved away. Dean landed on the dance floor with a loud thud, making the stage shake. I thought for sure the floor would have a dent in it. He quickly got back up, shouting, "Very funny, guys, I'm okay." When the song finished, Lacey, Miranda, and I rushed over to him. "Yeah, I'm fine," he said loudly. Then he leaned in close and whispered to me, "I'm not fine. Take me to the hospital." A doctor checked on Dean and wanted him to get x-rays to see how badly he was hurt. "Sweetheart," said Lacey, "we're here too early. We shouldn't be here for another 8 months. "Yeah, but you'll be the one in pain then," Dean said. Miranda and I were confused about what they meant. "We're having a baby," Lacey announced. She looked so happy. If I had any doubts about their marriage, that news put them to rest. As they say, all's well that ends well. The end, epilogue. 1. Dean being friends with Jerry turned out well for me. Without even knowing it, Jerry became my perfect partner in crime. I quickly realized that my plan to get close to Jerry and Miranda wouldn't work. Miranda loved her husband too much to ever cheat on him, and Jerry was just as loyal. The good part was that whenever I wanted to sneak around, I would say I was going to Jerry and Miranda's house, and Lacey would happily go with me. She never questioned where I was anymore. Because she trusted me, I got to enjoy myself whenever I wanted. I mean, I love Lacey, but after that first night back together, our time in bed quickly went back to how it was. That first night was strange. It felt like she couldn't get enough of me, and for the first time, she didn't make me wear protection. Honestly, we were just so happy to be together again that we forgot about it. Still, besides the fact that she just lay there like usual, it was okay. It was so good that I tried again the next night, but she told me I had hurt her. We tried again a few days later, but it wasn't as great. A few days after that, we had another go, and she said I needed to be gentler. I could tell she had been reading magazines again. She started asking me to do things like other men do, and I really wasn't interested, especially since she wouldn't do the same for me. One night, about a month after she left me, right before I had my stage diving accident, Lacey was all smiles. I thought she had found out about someone else and would kick me out. She kept calling me Daddy and smiling. "Guess what you did, Daddy?" she said. I was about to confess when she suddenly said, "You got me pregnant, Daddy." Wow, that was a close one. Too much honesty from Jerry had almost gotten me in trouble. But now I was going to be a dad. That made me see that even if things seemed bad, they were actually pretty good. Okay, Lacey isn't great in bed, but I'd still prefer to be married to her than anyone else. Now that I have Jerry and Miranda keeping her busy, I can find fun with other women. So every time Lacey smiles and asks if I'm cheating again, I pretend to be upset. I also lie and tell her that having a baby on the way made me more responsible. She loves hearing that and beams every time. It's mostly true, just a little lie. Okay, a big lie. So I don't have to say that she's both the prettiest woman and the worst partner ever. But if it makes her happy and keeps our marriage smooth, I can live with it. Miranda, I have to admit, having Lacey as a friend is great. She gives me someone to talk to and hang out with. I feel freer now that I don't have to obsess over my husband. Since I've cleared things with Dean, Jerry and I have almost no secrets left. As Lacey's belly grows and her body changes, it reminds me of my last little secret. Whenever we talk about Lacey and her baby, Jerry hints at how much he would love to see me pregnant. He talks about how amazing I would look, and then we end up in bed having a great time. We always go to bed anyway, but it feels even better when Jerry is trying to start a family. I love him so much. I can't afford to lose him. He would make such a wonderful dad. Not telling him that I can't have kids because of the abortion feels terrible. But I can't lose him. After years of trying, he might start to doubt us. I'd have to keep lying to keep him close. Maybe he would stay with me even if he knew we could never have kids. But I can't take that chance. I almost lost him over my issues with Dean. I feel awful for hiding the truth from him. One day, we'll see a doctor, and he'll find out. I'll try to put that off for as long as I can. When he does learn the truth, I'll promise him that I had no idea. I know that's a lie, and a really bad one to tell someone like Jerry who loves me so much. But I can't imagine my life without him, so I'll do my best to be the best wife ever. In the meantime, I'll have to live with my lie. Jerry, I love Miranda, and we are happy again. She loves me too. But I feel bad about keeping my secret from her about my weekend with Lacey. It feels wrong to hide this from her. She never asks, which makes it easier. The truth is, as much as I love Miranda, I love Lacey too. The two of them have become close, like sisters. Lacey comes over every day. Every time I see her, I feel a connection that makes me guilty again. I'm glad Lacey's marriage is better now. I think she'll be a great mother, and Dean seems happier now that he's going to be a dad. But I still think about my secret with Lacey. Sometimes I want to tell Miranda because she shared her secrets with me. Shouldn't I be honest too? Not telling her feels like a lie. But if I tell the truth, it could ruin my marriage and Lacey's. And Lacey has a child to care for. Besides, I'm not sure how she feels about me now. They say when a woman has a baby, she feels closer to the man involved. Lacey might have moved on. More than anything, I want both Lacey and Miranda to be happy, so my choice is to live with the lie. If keeping it makes their lives better and spares Dean from pain, then I have to do it. Lacey, every time I see Jerry, I can't help but think about how much I love him. But I know he loves Miranda. I have never felt this way about anyone else, not even my husband. I think of this time in my life as the second chapter of my marriage. In this chapter, I've grown up. I'm not just the pretty girl Dean married anymore. I want to protect what I found with Jerry. When I got back with Dean, I made a choice to be with him again. But it was disappointing. He didn't last long, and I could tell he was proud of himself after. I let him really believe he was successful. I see now that Dean cheating on me has its silver lining. Dean is happy, I'm happy, and Jerry is safe. I remember the night I told Jerry about the baby. I thought about how he and Dean had become close, and it would have been funny to say, "You're going to be an uncle." But I didn't. I need to protect Jerry. I love being friends with Miranda. I can trust her, unlike those who only pretend to be friends. Besides friendship, there are two benefits to this closeness. First, I get to see Jerry almost every day. I feel that he still cares for me, too. Second, by being close, Jerry can be part of his daughter's life right from the start. So I guess I'm not a princess anymore. I've become more complicated. I'm holding on to a lot of secrets. I fell in love with Jerry. He made me pregnant. And even bigger, I wanted it to happen. I knew he was the one for me long before we even got together. Letting Dean help me raise Jerry's child seems unfair, doesn't it? But he deserves it. He has cheated on me for years, even before we were married. He trapped me in a bad relationship that kept me from finding happiness. I can't blame Miranda for being with Jerry. If I'd had the chance to choose my path, things could have been different. But at least I see him every day. Every time our eyes meet a little longer, I feel butterflies in my stomach. In those few seconds when I think about us together, everything else feels small. The lies and the trouble don't seem important anymore. I see Jerry in the way our daughter looks and in her eyes. So I guess I will live with the lie. Hey, audience! If you liked this video and want to keep up with more thrilling stories, make sure to subscribe to Prince Cheating Tales and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss out on our upcoming adventures. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next wonderful story.